English test 1, 2, 3.
Check, check, check.
French test 1, 2, 3. We can send one over to you.
30 seconds. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Planning and Housing Committee and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee meeting number 6. We begin our meeting today with a land acknowledgement, and I do want to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded and never surrendered Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Could I get a roll call, please? Madam Clerk, who's going to do it?
Councillor Luloff. Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor Troster.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Kitts. Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower. Vice Chair Kelly.
Present.
Chair Brown.
Here.
Chair Leeper, you have quorum.
Thank you very
Chair,
much.
Mr. Chair, before you get going, I just like to advise the committee that Councillors Luloff, Tierney, and Kitts are at an event and will be joining in a few minutes.
Perfect. I knew Councillor Tierney would be joining forthwith, but I guess they're at the same event, so that's great. We'll welcome them very shortly, I'm sure. This is a special public meeting to discuss the revisions that may be required to the official plan of the City of Ottawa to ensure consistency with the provincial policy statement as set forth in item 3.1 on today's agenda. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on, I have April 16th, 2025. What's the actual date? That's okay. A week from today, June 25th, 2025. Please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay, so the first item we have is the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 Consistency Amendments. What I'm proposing is that we receive the presentation from staff. There are 8 roughly motions that we'll put on the record once the presentation is concluded. Then we're going to roll into 12 public delegations before we move into questions of staff. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lorraine for a presentation, or I'll turn it over to Royce, who will turn it over to Lorraine.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to introduce the planning policy team to joint committee. We have Lorraine Stevens, followed by Ben Norn and Ryan Dubé. And I'd like to acknowledge all the work that this team has done to advance the amendments before you today since we last met in April. It's a good thing this isn't the finance committee because I think this team put in a small dent into the budget with the amount of overtime they've put in on this project. But they put on a brave face when more was asked of them from stakeholders and myself. So thank you for your dedication to the project and to the city. So I ask Lorraine Stevens to take it over for the presentation.
Thank you, Royce. Thank you, chairs and committee members. I'll be sharing the proposed 2024 Provincial Planning Statement Consistency Amendments. Next slide, please. The 2024 Provincial Planning Statement replaces the 2020 Provincial Planning Statement. It provides directions on matters related to land use planning in Ontario, and it must be implemented through municipal planning policies such as Ottawa's official plan. Our official plan is currently consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statement, and staff proposed that OPA 46 and 47 will make the official plan consistent with the 2024 provincial planning statement. Next slide, please. The changes proposed are grouped into 5 categories: settlement area expansions, employment areas, agriculture, major transit station areas, and strategic growth areas. Next slide, please. There has been significant public notification and consultation, including a joint planning and housing and agricultural rural affairs committee on April 9th. 2 notices were provided for that meeting that were placed in our newspapers 1 week apart. Information was shared using Ottawa's Engage Ottawa page, which was continually updated as the project progressed. A notification list was initiated and people were invited to be included at every opportunity. Public circulation of the proposed amendments occurred from April 17th to May 15th. Circulation was sent to all those on the notification list, all community organizations registered on the city's public notification system, and all councillors. There is also a link to that circulation placed on Engage Ottawa. We have continually collected comments and responded to questions. Staff held meetings with community associations, industry, and the Federation of Citizens Association. We had an open house on June 2nd. All people on the notification list were invited, and it was also advertised in the newspapers. And notice of this joint meeting was advertised in the paper. And again, all people on our notification list were sent an email that this meeting was occurring. Next slide, please. For settlement area expansions, private applications for individual parcel additions are now allowed. We have now amended and provided new policies that establish how the city will maintain a sufficient supply of land to accommodate projected growth in light of these new permissions. Changes from the original circulation, guided by input from all sources that we circulated, we originally proposed to remove policy that permits the transfer of a country lot subdivision, also known as a swap policy. Instead, we are proposing to change the policy to reflect a transfer of privately serviced lots to privately serviced lots. This allows a slight uplift in number of lots, transferring from a minimum lot size of 0.8 hectares to 0.4 hectares per lot. Staff also acknowledged the feedback that future growth through expansion should be permitted in the influence area of the sand and gravel resource overlay and bedrock resource overlay where supported by a study. And we have recommended revisions to convey that. Next slide, please. For employment areas in Ottawa's, the employment areas in Ottawa's official plan are industrial and logistics and rural industrial and logistics. The 2024 provincial planning statement scopes down the types of uses permitted in employment areas, explicitly prohibiting retail, commercial, or institutional uses. Changes from our original circulation, guided by input from all sources that we circulated, are that staff are recommending revisions to new proposed policy for the new proposed policy indicating that lands within proximity to a goods movement highway interchange, including future interchanges, were to be protected for future industrial and logistics. And the revisions that we have clarify that lands around the highway interchanges should be reserved, and we describe the extent of how that area would be evaluated. Next slide, please. For agriculture, there's new policy requiring municipalities to use an agricultural systems approach. The provincial planning statement requires municipalities to use this approach based on provincial guidance. In the absence of new provincial guidelines, staff were advised by OMAFA to proceed with implementing agricultural system policies by referencing existing guidance documents produced for the Greater Golden Horseshoe in 2020. The effect of the proposed agricultural systems policies are simply to establish when agricultural impact assessments will or may be required as part of a complete application. This study helps staff consider how impacts to Ottawa's agricultural system are avoided, minimized, or mitigated through applications. It is not intended as a means to refuse development application. Rather, it provides a greater breadth of information in helping staff assess applications. The provincial planning statement now permits one more dwelling unit on prime agricultural land. Currently, we have permission for a primary for a primary dwelling unit and one additional dwelling unit. And now the new provincial planning statement permits a principal dwelling and 2 additional dwelling units under certain conditions. Changes from the original circulation, guided by input. As noted previously, we originally proposed to remove a policy that permits the transfer of a country lot subdivision. We also received comments from the perspective of reducing the fragmentation of rural lands. So the swap policy is proposed to remain but modified to reflect a transfer of privately serviced lots to privately serviced lots. Staff have proposed changes to original proposal of policies to add clarity that LEAR, or an area-specific assessment, is not a removal of land within a prime agriculture area, but is an assessment of whether land should be within a prime agriculture area based on new information. Next slide. For major transit station areas, they are now a new requirement of the 2024 provincial planning statement. It's defined as between 500 and 800 meter radius of an existing or planned higher order transit station. A higher order transit station in Ottawa includes our O train stations and BRT stations, bus rapid transit stations. Provincial plans have established a minimum density of 160 residents and jobs per hectare for these station areas. Any exceptions must be approved by the minister, whereby we must demonstrate that there are severe restrictions in the major transit station area, or if the major transit station area contains a major trip generator, such as a shopping mall or a park and ride. Changes from the original circulation were removal of the future major transit station areas. We have provided clarity for what for protected major transit station areas, since the terms are so similar, by relabeling a new term of protected hubs. We have also included more details to plan for major transit station areas, including identifying major transit station area target for people and jobs, and cross-referencing secondary plans and protected hubs. Next slide, please. The province has added a new section for strategic growth areas and have included policies in other sections for strategic growth areas. Strategic growth areas are nodes, corridors, and other areas that have been identified by municipalities to be the focus of accommodating intensification and higher density mixed uses in a more compact built form. Strategic areas identified by the province closely align with our current OP policies for corridors and hubs. Staff have identified secondary plans that were not consistent with the strategic growth areas identified in the official plan. Changes from the original circulation there were no significant changes from the original circulation to the strategic growth area policies, but some changes to what was proposed for some of the secondary plans in relation to strategic growth areas. There were changes. Next slide. Starting with Alta Vista, Faircrest Heights, Riverview Park secondary plan. This is in the outer urban transect. There are 4 major transit station areas, being Herdman, Smythe, Riverside, and Pleasant Park, as shown by the blue dots. 1 main street corridor being Smythe Road, as shown by the thick purple line. 4 minor corridors being Pleasant Park Road, Kilbourne Avenue, Heron Road, and Riverside Drive, as shown by the narrower purple lines. Amendments are proposed to allow building heights up to 6 stories on Pleasant Park, Kilbourne, Heron, and the south side of Smythe. Average lot depths along these corridors can reasonably achieve a transition to adjacent low-rise areas, providing potential intensification opportunities for the portions of the corridors within MTSAs, and to implement and align with the policy direction for corridors in Volume 1, which speak to a higher density of development than the adjacent neighborhoods. Changes from the original circulation are that 1245 Kilbourne has moved from the Billings Bridge MTSA to the Pleasant Park MTSA. The walking distance was basically the same, but after a closer view, it made more sense to bring it into the Pleasant Park MTSA, which also we treated that location as a hub designation for the purpose to plan for people and jobs to meet minimum MTSA targets, and it is a key development site for the Pleasant Park MTSA. Next slide, please. For the Carlton Heights secondary plan, this is in the inner urban, it has portions in the inner urban and outer urban transect. There are no major transit station areas here, but for strategic growth areas, we have Baseline Road as the Main Street corridor, the thick purple line, Prince of Wales Drive, Meadowland Drive, Heron Road, and Fisher Avenue as minor corridors, the thinner purple lines. The secondary plan provides significant opportunities for intensification, including up to 4 stories within the neighborhood and lands within the evolving neighborhood overlay. It also allows for up to 6 stories in some areas and up to 20 stories in other areas along large portions of the minor corridor lands within the plan. Amendments are proposed to specifically identify the remaining locations of minor corridors to have height permissions of 6 stories and establish direction for the introduction of commercial uses to these lands. Changes from the original circulation were that originally we proposed text changes only, but to provide greater clarity, we are now proposing amendments to the secondary plan schedule. Next slide, please. For the Central and East Downtown Core secondary plan, which is downtown core transect, there are 4 major transit stations, all the downtown LRT stations, 2 hub designations, which miss mentioning in this slide, but definitely strategic growth area, 2 hubs, east and west of the canal. There are 9 Main Street corridors and 10 minor corridors. Amendments were proposed to ensure the secondary plan was consistent for its strategic growth areas to focus growth and development. This includes ensuring greater heights to be permitted in hubs than on adjacent corridors, and within those corridors permitting greater heights than the adjacent neighborhoods. Changes from the original circulation, we removed most of the originally proposed height increases south of Lisgar and west of Kent due to potential heritage impacts. We removed the proposed height increases on Cooper Street as it is not one of the strategic growth areas. And we removed amendments to the density redistribution policies and any changes to the schedule for Uptown Rudo on-site density redistribution. Next slide, please. For the Old Ottawa East secondary plan, it is mostly within the inner urban transect, but does have some downtown core transect lands within it. There's no major transit station area here impacting the secondary plan, but the strategic growth areas are 2 Main Street corridors being Main Street and Hawthorne, and 1 minor corridor being Lees Avenue. In order to align with policy direction for strategic growth areas, staff propose height increases from 6 to 9 stories on select lots on Hawthorne and Main Street where an appropriate transition can be provided to abutting low-rise neighborhoods. To recognize the existing context and constrained lot fabric on Main Street south of Clegg and on Lees Avenue, staff proposed to allow for up to 4-story and also to introduce permissions for commercial uses. Changes from the original circulation are that we have reduced the proposed height increases along Lees Avenue and Main Street south of Clegg to 4 stories due to their lot depth and consistency with the application of an angular plane to the adjacent neighborhood. And we introduced a new height schedule for the entire secondary plan area. Next slide, please. For the Richmond Road Westboro secondary plan, it is within the inner urban transect. There are 2 major transit station areas being Westboro and Kitchie-Zibi. The strategic growth areas are 2 Main Street corridors, Scott Street and Richmond Road, and 3 minor corridors, Kirkwood, McCrae, and Churchill. Within the portion subject to the Westboro major transit station area, amendments to the secondary plan propose maximum height increases north of the transit station, including up to 40 stories immediately north on the Federal Graham Spry building site. The Kitchie-Zibi major transit station area has a smaller catchment area and corresponding people and jobs target due to a significant portion being within the Ottawa River on the west and the major transit station area boundary ending at Churchill Avenue, which is the shared boundary with the adjacent Westboro major transit station area. The Richmond Road Main Street is the primary strategic growth area within this major transit station area. Potential development areas west of Churchill Avenue and south of the Transitway are identified for high-rise permissions. The permitted heights in the secondary plan are amended to help achieve minimum density target for the Kitchissippi and Westboro major transit station areas while preserving the general intent of the secondary plan. Changes from the original circulation is that there was the addition of a 9-story height limit permission at the municipal Bloomfield yards. Next slide, please. For the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan, which is within the inner urban transect, there's no major transit station area, and the strategic growth areas are the Main Street corridor of Beechwood and the minor corridor Hemlock. Again, the Main Street is the thicker line and the minor corridor is the thinner purple line at the south end of the secondary plan. The policy direction in the secondary plan for its 2 strategic growth areas is inconsistent with that of Volume 1 of the official plan. Accordingly, modest amendments to the Beechwood Main Street corridor and Hemlock minor corridor are proposed. The amendments would allow up to 6 stories on the Beechwood Main Street corridor and 4-story on the Hemlock minor corridor, subject to appropriate transitions and sensitivity to the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. The proposed heights are still below the maximums permitted in Volume 1 of the official plan, but they bring the secondary plan generally in line with Volume 1 while considering context. There were no significant changes from the original circulation. Next slide, please. For the Sherbourne and New Orchard secondary plan, this is within the inner urban transect. There are 2 major transit station areas, being the New Orchard and Sherbourne stations. The strategic growth area is the Main Street corridor, being Richmond Road. The station area and Main Street designations are the primary strategic growth areas within this major transit station area, and they are expected to accommodate the majority of the planned growth. The height permissions for the station area designation closest to Sherbourne Station are too restrictive to achieve the density targets for the broader major transit station areas. The height permissions are therefore scaled up proportionally, with the maximum permitted height being 27 stories, subject to similar criteria as previously applied. Height increases are proposed to other mid-rise designations within the secondary plan, while still within the mid-rise category on the south side and north side away from the stations. The remaining segment of Richmond Road, designated as Main Street with a higher residential minimum density target due to the low proportion of strategic growth areas within the major transit station area. The segment that is adjacent to Byron Avenue has a mid-rise park frame designation that would be increased to allow up to 9 stories, subject to specific policies. These changes would allow for sufficient development potential to meet the overall people and jobs target of the major transit station area, while maintaining the general intent and framework of the secondary plan. There were no significant changes from the original circulation. Next slide, please. The Stittsville Main Street secondary plan is in the suburban west transect. There are no major transit station areas, and the strategic growth area is the Main Street corridor, being Stittsville Main Street. Is policy consistent with achieving the objectives of the strategic growth areas in the provincial planning statement. The proposed amendment increases the maximum building heights for lots that can achieve the transition policies in Volume 1 of the official plan. The modest high-rise permissions in the Crossing Bridge precinct allow for high-rise where the lot fabric is suitable. The enabling policies for the modest high-rise work within the framework of the existing secondary plan, which speaks to the existing low-rise buildings and the community desire to maintain a more human-scale village atmosphere. The changes from the original circulation, guided by input from sources that were circulated, that after reviewing the context of Stittsville Main Street precinct, staff now recommend maximum height permissions of moderate high-rise buildings of 10 to 18 stories in the Crossing Bridge precinct, which is the area north of the blue line that you see there. Whereas previously we proposed 9 stories in that precinct and 6 stories in the neighboring Pool Creek precinct. Next slide. So now we're to the recommendations, and we are asking that you recommend council adopt official plan amendment 46 and adopt official plan amendment 47 to list the prescribed information materials that may be requested as part of an application under the Planning Act after written approval is received from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We would ask for a declaration by resolution to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing that official plan amendments 46 and 47 are consistent with the provincial planning statement, and also to receive the consultation steps. The next step after council would be to provide the official plan amendments to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stevens. Apologies, the button on my mic is a little tricky. So we've got a whack of motions that we'll get on the table now, just so the delegates are aware of what those are. I think staff have seen all of them, but folks may want to speak to them. So settle in. I'll ask various folks to move these motions. First, Councillor Curry, I believe, do you want to introduce a motion on the provincial policy statement, or sorry, the review of the TMP, IMP, and AMPS?
Right, and this is on behalf of Councillor Gower. All right, whereas changes introduced by updates to secondary plans in the city's official plan are required to align with the 2024 Provincial Planning Statement, PPS, and whereas these changes will provide increased potential density around strategic growth areas such as major corridors and around existing and planned transit stations, and whereas due to direction from the province in the PPS, the city has a statutory obligation to permit developers to apply for urban boundary expansions, and whereas these expansions I need to read from my own, I think. Whereas these expansion proposals may occur outside the normal process of urban boundary expansion that follows population growth planning, and whereas the city will soon be undertaking a reassessment of its population growth projections, and whereas the city is also undertaking a significant update of its zoning bylaw to be more permissive of a wider range of housing types in a greater number of areas, and whereas these changes are unlikely to be fully reflected in the TMP, the IMP, the AMP, which may have previously relied on old zoning or secondary plan assumptions to predict future needs. Therefore, be it resolved that the Joint Planning and Housing Committee and Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council direct staff to undertake a review of the TMP, IMP, and AMPs after conducting a population forecast update, and be it further resolved that this review include a consideration for development within the established timeframes for communities whose secondary plans were updated to permit a greater amount of development so as to ensure that their infrastructure needs are aligned to support development activities, and be it further resolved that this review takes into consideration any other zoning, land use planning, or growth management factors which may impact future or present infrastructure needs.
Thank you. Who could say no to that? Councillor Curry, did you have one on behalf of Councillor Carr?
Yes. This is about yes. Okay.
Faircrest Heights?
Yeah, everyone settle in. Whereas staff have provided an updated calculation regarding the density target within the Pleasant Park major transit station area, and whereas a 30-meter lot depth is required to accommodate 6-story buildings, and whereas Smythe Road is designated as a main street due to a wide right-of-way and lots that are 30 meters deep, making 6 stories an appropriate maximum building height. And whereas Heron Road also has a wide right-of-way, lots that are 30 meters deep, and whereas Heron Road, while only a minor corridor, is identified as a transit way with at-grade crossing, thus making 6 stories an appropriate maximum building height. And whereas Kilbourne Avenue has a mixture of lot depths greater and lesser than 30 meters, which would create a pathwork of building heights throughout the street. And whereas Pleasant Park Avenue has a narrow right-of-way, but generally deeper lots, which can provide higher density low-rise development with a reduced minor corridor minimum density target of 80 units per hectare. Therefore, be it resolved that the maximum building height of 4 stories be retained within the minor corridors on Pleasant Park Avenue and Kilbourne Avenue within the Alta Vista secondary plan. Be it further resolved that the supporting document 1, Appendix B, Volume 2, Amendments to Report ACS 2025 PDBPS0043 be amended as follows. 1. Amendment 2.1 be deleted and replaced with 1.3 purpose. The purpose of this secondary plan is to guide future growth and change according to key principles which deal with land use and site development in order to maintain the quality of life in the planning area as it evolves over time. More specifically, A, to ensure that neighborhood development generally accommodates additional density and building types that complement the scale and form of the existing buildings, employing site designs that consider the character of the neighborhood designation, which is defined by low-rise buildings, green front yards, and tall trees along the streets. 2, Amendment 2.2 be deleted and replaced with Section 2 policies, low-rise and mid-rise development. 1, the following portions of arterial, major collector, and collector streets shown on Schedule A designation plan are designed for low-rise and mid-rise neighborhood development. In determining the acceptability of low-rise and mid-rise neighborhood growth proposals, lot sizes in the immediate surrounding blocks of the proposed growth will be considered representative of the typical lot size of the surrounding area. Where lot sizes vary as a result of redevelopment, street trees at the same interval as the established street tree alignment must be provided in order to maintain streetscape continuity. A, south side of Smythe Road, Main Street from Alta Vista Drive to Faircrest Heights Park, low-rise and mid-rise buildings up to 6 stories are permitted. And B, Alta Vista Drive from Dale Avenue to Heron Road, excluding that portion of Alta Vista Drive from the Green Transportation and Utility Corridor to Smythe Road, low-rise buildings for residential and uses noted in Section 1.3B are permitted. And Pleasant Park Road Minor Corridor from Riverside Drive to the Green Transportation and Utility Corridor, low-rise buildings are permitted. And D, Heron Road from Bank Street secondary plan boundary to east of the Heron corridor, low-rise and mid-rise buildings up to 6 stories are permitted. And E, Kilbourne Avenue minor corridor from Blossom Drive / Utah Street to Green Transportation and Utility Corridor and Featherstone Drive, low-rise buildings are permitted. 3, Amendment 2.3 be deleted and replaced with proposed amendment to add a new policy 4 to Section 2. Policies is deleted. 2, maintain the subsequent amendment number order. 4, Amendment 2.4 be deleted and replaced with proposed amendment to add a new policy 5 to Section 2. Policies is deleted. 2, maintain the subsequent amendment number order. Be it further resolved that supporting document 1, Appendix D, schedule amendments to report ACS 2025 PDB-PS 0043 be revised by deleting Schedule A, amending Volume 2A, Alta Vista Faircrest Riverview Park Secondary Plan, Schedule A Designation Plan, and replacing with Schedule A Designation Plan to the Alta Vista Faircrest Riverview Park Secondary Plan amended as follows. 1, remove the roads designated for low-rise neighborhood development from the south side of Smythe Road and both sides of Heron Road and replace with corridors permitted for low-rise and mid-rise, maximum 6 stories.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. You'll have a chance to let us know what that means as we get further into the debate. Councillor Curry, do you want to keep going?
Sure.
Thanks.
Next one. Whereas staff have provided an updated calculation regarding the number of hectares for strategic growth area designations within the Riverview Major Transit Station area and the Pleasant Park Major Transit Station area, and whereas the updates alter the number of people and jobs to be planned within these major transit station areas, and whereas staff proposed site-specific amendments at 1245 Kilbourne Avenue in supporting document 1, Appendix B, Volume 2, through amendment number 2.5, and whereas staff consider the minimum density target at 1245 Kilbourne Avenue to be similar as a hub within document 4 only for the purposes of planning for the PPS target people and jobs at the Pleasant Park MTSA, therefore be it resolved that supporting document 1, Appendix A, Volume 1, amendments to report ACS 2025 PDB-PS 0043 be amended by revising amendment number 1.8, Table 3 as follows. 1, for the Riverside MTSA row and Main Street minimum density target column, replace NA with 120. And 2, for the Pleasant Park MTSA row and minor corridor minimum density target column, replace 100 with 80. Be it further resolved that supporting document 4 to report ACS 2025 PDB-PS 0043 be amended as follows. For Riverside Station, delete Main Street 0 hectares, minor corridor 0 or HA, whatever, planned people and jobs 3,900, and replace with Main Street 5 HA, minor corridor 4 HA, planned people and jobs 5,600. 2, for Pleasant Park Station, delete Hub 1 HA, planned people and jobs 10,600, and replace with Hub 4 HA, planned people and jobs 11,300. And amend the comments section by adding the following underlined text. Pleasant Park MTSA includes a large area surrounding the Pleasant Park MTSA station, which extends along the Pleasant Park minor corridor and into the surrounding neighborhoods. The existing built form is very low density, meaning gradual intensification will be required to achieve the density target for this station. Most of this intensification is expected to occur along the proposed corridor amendments to the secondary plan that align with the minor corridor designation as a strategic growth area in the official plan, and a site-specific amendment at 1245 Kilbourne Avenue, which is assumed to have the same minimum density targets as a hub designation and is treated as such for the purposes of planning to achieve the PPS target people and jobs. Due to the development potential at 1245 Kilbourne Avenue, a minimum density target of 80 dwellings per hectare is planned for the minor corridors. With these amendments to the secondary plan, these strategic growth areas and intensification opportunities within the neighborhood designation will achieve the target of 10,600 people and jobs per hectare.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. We're going to give you a break for the next hour or so. And I'll ask Chair Brown to make a motion with respect to proposed updates to the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan on behalf of Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Whereas the proposed amendment to the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan designates a portion of the Hemlock Minor Corridor for building heights up to 4 stories between Juliana Road and Lansdowne Road South. And whereas the properties at 550 and 560 Maple Lane East have primary frontage on Maple Lane East rather than Hemlock Road and are not in keeping with the minor corridor condition. And whereas 550 Maple Lane East is a contributing property in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. And whereas the proposed amendment acknowledges the heritage value and character of the Rockcliffe Park HCD through its proposed policies related to compatibility in section 4.1, therefore be it resolved that the properties at 550 and 560 Maple Lane East be removed from document 1, appendix D, schedule F, Rockcliffe Park secondary plan, schedule A, designation plan as lands to be redesignated to residential multi-unit up to 4 stories, and be it further resolved that staff be directed to consider the proposed new policies 4.16 and 7 in the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan related to ensuring compatibility with the heritage values and attributes of the Rockcliffe Park HCD as part of the final draft of the new zoning bylaw.
Thank you very much, Chair Brown. Let's mix it up. Councillor Menard has a motion which I understand Councillor Kavanagh is going to introduce.
Thank you. Staff have received additional submissions relating to the proposed amendments in report AC 2025 PDB PS 0043 Citywide Provincial Planning Statement 2024 Consistency Amendments, and whereas staff have considered the submissions and recommend changes to the proposed amendments, therefore be it resolved that City Council delete and replace the following amendments from document 1, Appendix B, Volume 2 amendments.
I think we'll
Okay,
skip the tables,
can you
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you
Read
very
at
much.
your
And
leisure.
Councillor
Thank you.
Menard will have an opportunity to talk to us about what that means a little bit later on. Councillor Brockington, in your own ward, your own motion, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. What could possibly be the most exciting motion of the afternoon, which I'll now read. Whereas 1335 Prince of Wales Drive is currently designated for 6 stories, whereas the property has sufficient lot depths to accommodate increased height, whereas the property is immediately adjacent to a neighborhood high-rise designation, therefore be it resolved that notwithstanding the maximum building height within the Carlton Heights secondary plan, 1335 Prince of Wales permit a maximum height of up to 9 stories. Be it further resolved that staff prepare the necessary amendments to the secondary plan through the official plan amendment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. I don't want this to end. Councillor Dudas, can you keep it going for us?
I'm on board. Whereas Section 5 of the official plan designates transects And whereas section 5.3 of the official plan pertaining to the outer urban transect defines this transect as being comprised of neighborhoods inside the Greenbelt. And whereas section 5.3 of the official plan pertaining to the outer urban transect seeks to achieve recognition of a suburban pattern of built form and site design. And whereas section 5.4 of the official plan pertaining to the suburban transect defines this transect as being composed of neighborhoods within the urban boundary located outside the Greenbelt. And whereas section 5.5 of the official plan pertaining to the Greenbelt and rural transect areas notes that despite its predominantly rural and natural character, these lands are located within the city's urban boundary and separates the outer urban transect from the suburban transect area. Whereas the Greenbelt is not a clear boundary between outer urban and suburban, as there are some communities that exist neither within the innermost boundary of the Greenbelt nor outside the outermost boundary Greenbelt in the manner contemplated in the official plan. Whereas the communities within the Greenbelt were therefore determined to be outer urban for the purposes of the OP, whereas the constraints imposed by the National Capital Commission and the federal government's ownership of lands within the Greenbelt are such that some communities that are surrounded by the Greenbelt may be unable to develop the infrastructure necessary to support the kind of growth that may be permitted in future zoning. Whereas the city contemplates how to best manage growth to address the housing crisis, it must also consider these infrastructure development constraints. Therefore, it be resolved that staff be directed to amend section 5.4 of the official plan to define the suburban transect in the following manner. The suburban transect comprises neighborhoods within the urban boundary that are either located outside the Greenbelt or located entirely within the Greenbelt and whose outermost border is fewer than 250 meters away from the outermost edge of the Greenbelt. Be it further resolved that any technical amendments, changes to schedules, or updates to other sections of the official plan necessary to bring into force the intent of this change be made as part of this same OPA. And be it further resolved that any neighborhoods whose transect designations are altered by nature of this OPA have that change reflected in the next draft of the new zoning bylaw.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dudas. And just to end this part of the meeting on a high note, there is a motion, a technical motion with respect to the Orleans Corridor Secondary Plan. I'd ask Chair Brown if you could read that in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas report entitled Provincial Planning Statement 2024 Consistency Amendments recommends the adoptions of Official Plan Amendment 46 as presented in Document 1, and whereas staff require a revision to the minimum density target per net hectare in supporting Document 1, Appendix B, Volume 2 amendments, Amendment number 2.47, 5.40 Train Minor Corridor, New Policy 5, therefore be it resolved that Document 1, Appendix B, Volume 2 amendments, Amendment number 2.47, 5.40 Train Minor Corridor, New Policy 5 be amended to reflect the following revision from 10 to 100 dwellings per net hectare. 5, the O-Train Minor Corridor designation is planned for a minimum density target of 100 dwellings per net hectare. Net hectares refers to the privately owned lands prior to any potential severance or division and excludes private roads, areas that provide the same function of a public right-of-way.
Thank you so much, Chair Brown. So those are the motions that we have. If anyone is looking for copies of those or unsure where to find them, chat with the clerks. We'll move into the public delegations. There are 12. We will start with John Dance, followed by PM Vasudev, who will be followed by Roddy Bovair with Carp Road. So John, I think you're here. Yep. Wonderful. You're no stranger to the committee. You'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation and welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. And appreciate the opportunity of being able to speak here today. I specifically want to speak, second slide, please. I want to speak about the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan and the revisions being proposed within the context of the Provincial Planning Statement. In April, the Community Association learned of the 50% in height increases proposed to our 3 major roads. in May. Good changes were made on the basis of the comments from the planning committee. In June, further changes being considered as per the amendment that Councillor Kavanagh proposed today. So we really have great appreciation for what Councillor Menard has done to support us. We appreciate that city staff seem to have a better understanding of what our secondary plan is and what it's supposed to do and how it came about. Appreciate that. We're on the right track for sure, but really greater community consultation is required. To have all these amendments before you today represents a pathetic lack of consultation. It was not significant community consultation, and I suspect most of the people in Old Ottawa East are totally unaware of these changes that the city staff are proposing. Next slide, please. The original consultation for our secondary plan took 4 years, and that was too long perhaps, but it resulted in something really good. We had businesses, landowners, institutional parties, and the community members all involved. We had lots of public meetings. The result of, and indeed with the subsequent SPA, or rather OPAs that were required, they involved community meetings where people knew what was going on and comment. Our secondary plan was a yes in my backyard, and it is. And the results where we have, at the moment, twice as many dwelling units approved as the target originally was. We have compatibility with and strengthening of our community. It's a stark comparison to how this PPS consistency exercise has gone on. I don't understand why councillors can do this to communities. The next slide, please. Elsewhere, take a look. I don't know if any of you have checked to see what other municipalities are doing in terms of PPS consistency, but they're sure not doing what this city is proposing to do. I looked at Toronto. They're having the first public meeting on it tomorrow. They're talking about such things as archaeological resource protection, heritage protection, so on. London's their key thing is to make sure that the Ministry of Finance population projections are taken rather than the cities. Other municipalities, large municipalities, I couldn't see anything being done to rush through in this fashion to make sure the official plans are consistent. I have to question the fundamental approach and the urgency that it's been shoved through. Next slide, please. We support the FCA's position that there should be the revisions to the secondary plan should be deferred, and there should be some real consultation with communities so they know what's going on. The next slide and final slide, please. So in summary, why is Ottawa rushing PPS changes to secondary plans when it appears no other Ontario municipality is proceeding in such a manner? Why hasn't there been real consultation with communities? Yeah, sure, you could have driven out to the far end of Ottawa for a meeting to hear at an open house, but there hasn't been real consultation. It's truly disappointing, and it's indicative of cities' feeling about communities. You just go ahead and do things. What is the need here? Really, to have these increased densities that are being proposed through these secondary plan amendments. You already are going to be adhering to the greater densities, the greater per lot densities, the 3 or 4 per lot. You're already going to get much more density through OP as it stands right now, and through the zoning bylaw amendments that are revisions that are being considered. It's just beyond me why you're pushing this much more. You're really, all you're doing is detracting from communities. You are not achieving what you want, what you should be. It's one thing to have more density, but you also need to have the quality of communities, the quality of living. And I believe you're undermining it by pushing this through in such a hurry. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, John. You've posed a number of questions. I think some of my colleagues have as well. So I know we're going to have an exploration of that with city staff. I don't see any questions for you. So
Chair,
thank you. Oh,
Chair, I've got my hand up.
Okay. Sorry, was your hand up? Go ahead. Please go ahead, Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much.
See your hand.
Not to worry. Yeah, I'm online today, Chair. Chair. Hope that's okay. Thank you, John, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask you: are you aware of a deadline with which the city needs to send this back to the province to, I guess, to have some consistency with the new PPS?
I certainly didn't find such a deadline in either the city's documentation for today's meeting nor anywhere online. It doesn't seem that other municipalities are seized with some urgency because perhaps it doesn't exist. Thank you.
Okay, and I will, Chair, if you can just, I don't know if you know of a deadline, Chair, but it would be helpful for councillors to have that answered.
So if this is, I'm sorry, Councilor Menard, I think you're posing a question of staff. Does the committee mind if staff answer that question? Okay, so could I ask staff to speak to the timing of this?
So Chair, when we were before this committee in April, we talked about the timelines of the project. There are two main drivers. One was the fact that our official plan does not currently consider the ability to make applications to settlement area expansions. We have a number of applications today, and we need to update our official plan in order to move forward with evaluation of those applications. The second is the concept of strategic growth areas combined with our current project timeline for the new zoning bylaw. In order to have the draft zoning that council adopts for any changes to the official plan incorporating that new zoning bylaw, that needs to be done by July so that the draft provisions can go through accessibility and translation conversion for public consultation in September for consideration by December. So it's really the context of what this city is doing for our projects to try to dovetail the two projects so that we have that zoning in place. Otherwise, implementing zoning for any changes we do in this official plan amendment would be years out after the new zoning bylaw is in full force and effect.
Thank you. So I'm not going to press staff for any further detail on that. If anyone has any questions for it, they can certainly chat with them during the staff questions presentation. But Councillor Menard, did you want to continue with your questioning of the delegation?
Chair, I'll just say some of that context is helpful, certainly, just with the delegation, because I found this to be a bit rushed too. And certainly we've worked in collaboration with staff in the community, but it has been fast, and there are a lot of changes here that we weren't anticipating after the original OP. So I guess just to the delegation, the final question I would have for you is, in terms of what would a bit more time or consultation do you think, in terms of where we might end up with communities being informed, and then outcomes that I think everyone can live with, because this has been a kind of a negotiation of sorts, and I'm not sure we've had enough time to fully delve into everything.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Menard. I think you need several months. You can't do this during the summer. If communities are really going to understand what's there, you need some time. And with greatest respect, I know people have worked so hard on the zoning bylaw, but you're getting a huge amount. If there has to be an amendment in 2 years' time or a year's time to reflect the secondary plan change, fine, do it then. But get it right before you just shove it through. Anyway, that was my perspective, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And John, I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you for the delegation today. And we'll move on to PM Vasudev, who will be followed by Roddy Bolivar, followed by Wayne French. PM.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My reason for being here this afternoon is just to point out an omission in the PPS compliance amendments that are being proposed by the city staff. The omission is with regard to encouragement of communal septic systems in unserviced areas to permit multi-unit housing. So the current set of rules in section 4.7 of the official plan are based on conventional septic systems, which require more space. The whole design and operational principle are different with older conventional septic systems and their leaching beds, whereas there have been tremendous advances in wastewater treatment technology, and we have now compact plants that are scalable, that can service anywhere from under a dozen homes to several dozen homes, and that technology has already been implemented by the city in the subdivision in CARP. Now, recognizing these developments in wastewater treatment technology, the provincial planning statement urges the adoption of, or at least encourages the adoption of such technologies and building communal septic systems for unserviced lands. So, multi-unit residential development can be taken up in those lands without waiting for public infrastructure to be provided. And I speak in the context of a couple of properties in East Urban Community Phase 2, but that may not be very relevant for what I'm saying now. So Section 4.7 of the official plan needs to be amended to bring it in line with Section 3.6.3 of the Provincial Planning Statement 2024. And I have taken up this with Ms. Laurier Stevens, and I'm pursuing this. I've sought her guidance on making a formal submission to city staff in this matter to initiate the amendment. And just for the information of the people here, in particular the councillors, York Region has already come up with a framework for implementation of communal septic systems, whereas our rules, norms, the official plan norms on communal septic systems are still stuck in the past, so to speak, and they reflect the principle of conventional septic systems, and it has norms like a minimum lot size of 0.4 hectares, and only 5 residential units can be serviced by one system, and they all have to be under a single ownership and so forth. I have prepared a formal submission, which I've informally shared with Ms. Laurier Stevens, but I'll be following up on this. But I thought it is a matter that deserves the attention of this meeting, and it should be placed on record. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm just checking to see if anyone has any questions for you, and I don't see that anyone does. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Roddy Bolivar, followed by Wayne French. Are you both making a presentation, or are you joint today? It's a single presentation. Thank you. Gentlemen, no strangers to this committee. We're in your hands.
I guess I just get to go ahead. Thanks, Wayne. I'm here on behalf of the Carp Road Corridor Business Association. Wayne French is our chair. Thanks, Wayne, for accompanying me. Thank you to staff and committee members for hearing from us today. Today, we're here on behalf of the business and property owners along Carp Road between Stittsville and the village. Our business area has a remarkable history. For instance, the Foundation Company of Canada, who was the primary designer and construction agency for the Diefenbunker, became part of construction company Acon, who purchased local firm Carson Cartridge, who now operate as GIP from the office at 3232 Carp Road. So in this one example, the Carp Corridor business community can draw a straight line from 1959 to today. Many of you will be familiar with corridor members like Lee Valley Tools, Oz Optics, MCon, all of them Ottawa family business success stories. There's other stories, the story of the Carp Airport, which established in 1940 for wartime use, the story of the history of aggregate extraction and where all that sand and stone are in buildings around Ottawa, the story of area development once 417 went by, and the story of the local schoolhouse, which is now the Cheshire Cat Pub, and we have members who have visited both. The First Council of Amalgamated Ottawa recognized that there was a well-established economic hub and economic opportunity along Carp Road Corridor and made designation of the business area council priority. That priority resulted in the first community design plan completed in Amalgamated Ottawa. It stated a vision of the area with a wide range of uses, and the official plan designation and zoning put in place in response to the community design plan to a large degree reflected the historic business community in the area. Since the 2004 OP, the corridor has been designated an employment area. The designation, along with the zoning, reflected the existing business community and anticipated and encouraged the community would continue to grow in a similar manner, an area with a wide range of uses. All this to say that the economic development planning policy of the former West Carleton and the amalgamated city have worked very well. We understand that owing to changes to the definition of employment area in the provincial policy statement, the area opportunity may change. Carp Road Corridor board members consider that change may reduce economic opportunity in the area. We intend to retain professional assistance to help us validate that position, but in the meantime, are here today to ask you, will these changes have an impact on economic development? If the answer to that is yes, then what can the city do to mitigate that impact, especially today when Ottawa's economy is facing so many challenges? We acknowledge that there has been public consultation process on this matter and that we did not take advantage. Our focus for some time has been on the zoning bylaw, and in particular, the draft 2 of the bylaw was quite different from draft 1 in the permitted uses. I presume the reduction in permitted uses in draft 2 was owing to the change that you're entertaining today. We don't envy planners in Ontario trying to keep up with all the changes coming from Toronto. The recommendations in this report are intended to bring alignment to the PPS. We acknowledge and have no objection to that. We do ask in closing that moving forward, there will be economic development content in reporting so that our members understand that the city understands how changes may be impacting their business and economic development future, and that we know that the city is considering those negative impacts and possibly bringing forward changes to implement or to reduce those impacts. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bolivar. I don't see any questions for you from members. Okay. Thank you for the presentation today.
Very much.
And thanks, Mr. French. Susan Peterson Dakino, who will be followed by Paul Goodkey, who will be followed by Daniel Goldberg.
I apologize, I'm not Susan Peterson.
No.
But I'm Scott Hetherington from the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association. So we're going to speak together.
Good to see you.
Don't mind. Thanks very much.
You have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the joint committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So less than 3 weeks ago, the residents of Rockcliffe Park were glad to welcome our councillor, Ralston King, and you, Chairman Leeper, to the Government of Canada's ceremony celebrating our historic community. The Government of Canada deemed our district worthy of being named a National Historic Site, which is a rare distinction. There are only 33 others in Canada, places like Lunenburg, Old Quebec, and Niagara-on-the-Lake. It is a first for the nation's capital. Ottawa City Council, and thank you, supported our application to seek this distinction back in 2021. It's not a quick process. It's a rigorous process, but it was ultimately successful, and you should be proud of this. Mayor Sutcliffe sent greetings expressing his, quote, deep respect and gratitude to everyone who has worked to preserve Rockcliffe's unique character and heritage. Councillor King spoke eloquently, saying in part, Rockcliffe Park stands as proof that great communities are built, not just with vision, but with care for the land, respect for history, and dedication to the common good. He said, today we ensure that future generations will inherit this legacy, preserved for all Canadians to cherish. Needless to say, the community was elated, and this generation of Rockcliffe residents, with the support of Canada and the City of Ottawa, had found a very meaningful way to join previous generations in preserving a historic landmark for Canada. Today, only 3 weeks later, we believe we're faced with a stark challenge to preserving that history and that heritage. And we anticipate that the new zoning bylaw will be another such challenge. We're not sure why this should be. I will turn things over to Daniel Goldberg to explain further. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This one? Okay, sorry, start again. Good afternoon, dear committee members. My name is Daniel Goldberg and I'm an architect and resident of Rockcliffe Park. I'm speaking today to respectfully request that you reconsider the minor corridor designation for the western section of Hemlock Road in Rockcliffe Park. This designation is based on an incomplete analysis, in my view, and it does not reflect the actual character of this stretch of road or its surrounding neighborhood. It creates a planning policy that is fundamentally in conflict with other existing provincial and municipal policies. I join many other local residents in asking this committee to recognize that conflict and respond with the nuance and leadership this area deserves. I did submit a presentation. I don't know whether that's, yes, there's the first slide. I thought it would be worthwhile just sharing a few impressions to give some context. On paper, Hemlock may seem like a simple continuation of Beechwood Avenue, but in practice it is not. For approximately 400 meters, Hemlock narrows, curves, and moves through a remarkably distinct urban landscape. Next slide. On the south side is the steep escarpment of the National Cemetery. On the north side is the National Historic District of Rockcliffe Park, where mature trees conceal the dozen or so modest single-story homes along the road. Only 4 of these are actually accessible from Hemlock. This short section of Hemlock is an urban gateway. Next slide. And next slide. A transition space between the more built-up Beechwood corridor to the west and the more open and built-up land towards Saint Laurent Boulevard in the east. With its dense tree cover, dappled light, and the occasional wild turkey crossing, this is not just another arterial road. It is a city-forest corridor that bridges 2 nationally significant landscapes. Next slide. Unfortunately, this uniqueness is not reflected in the city staff's report. The city's technical map even labels the cemetery escarpment as, quote, evolving neighborhood, a perhaps amusing but revealing mistake that suggests this area has not been properly studied. The concerns are therefore clear. The minor corridor designation threatens the distinct identity and landscape character of the Hemlock streetscape. The city's analysis is incomplete as it fails to reflect the unique site context. The road designation is incompatible with the principles of urban transects, which are so foundational to the official plan. Those principles recognize that different urban environments must be planned according to their own rules. Applying the generic and uniform 4-story policy to Hemlock is not a sensitive response to the historic low-rise community. The designation of the minor corridor further undermines the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan, whose purpose is to guide context-sensitive development. Harmonizing language between the secondary plan and the official plan should not mean overriding its intent. The proposed amendments do not allow the city to meaningfully add more homes. Only around 12 homes border this road section, and the potential intensification would only ever be able to create a negligible number of new homes. In summary, the minor corridor designation for the western part of Hemlock simply cannot reasonably be justified. This is not a corridor that should be treated like others. It's a nationally significant heritage area and an ecologically sensitive landscape. The risk of harm to heritage, to the public realm, and to community trust is high, whilst the benefits are essentially zero. As it stands, the corridor designation and the proposed changes to the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan represent a hardly defensible position from an urban planning point of view. This raises a central question. What kind of intensification is appropriate here? That should not be primarily a legal question, as it is about urban planning and design. Thoughtful planning that balances heritage protection with growth. Next slide. Right now, the city is trying to reconcile 2 contradictory policies, one that protects a 1 to 2-story build form and another that allows up to 4 stories. These are fundamentally at odds. You cannot preserve Rockcliffe Park's heritage whilst also planning for its radical transformation. The community is now looking to you to resolve that contradiction and provide clear guidance. With regard to the way forward, I'd like to add that this is not about opposing all change. There are real opportunities, I believe, for gentle intensification within Rockcliffe Park through coach houses, additional units, more efficient use of lots. But these tools are all context appropriate. The minor corridor designation is not. At this point, I would like to also point out that I'm encouraged by the recent discussions around this topic amongst committee members and city staff. I would like to take the opportunity also to thank Councillor King and his team for listening to our concerns. I respectfully ask that
I'm
the
just going
committee.
to ask you to wrap up, okay? Your time has elapsed, and we do have a question for you.
It's the last sentence. Respectfully ask that the committee reconsiders the designation and defers any changes to the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan until there has been a more careful review. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you so much for the collective delegation. And Daniel, I know you talked about how phrases such as context sensitive don't really protect the area in practice. So I'm just wondering what other types of wording or rules would you like to see instead to make sure that the heritage of Rockcliffe is protected?
Well, I think that there's a lot of good wording in the heritage plan. I think it has to just be interpreted, and there has to be clear guidance on what that means. But there are a lot of tools, there's a lot of language in the heritage plan, and I think that can be reconciled and further maybe expand, developed with the goal to intensify further. I think there's an ability to and a potential to do that, but currently the two opposing policies here are not working at all, I think.
And I would agree that we need to seek a better balance between heritage and intensification. I know that some of the comments that I've heard from the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association has been about trying to find that balance. And I know I'm committed to continuing to work with the community to do that. I know you also raised the point that intensification here in this instance would only add a very small number of homes, but could do a lot of damage to heritage and community trust. I'm just curious about what's your message to those who argue that every part of the city has to do its part for intensification, especially in specific instances of heritage conservation districts, because we know that we're trying to balance those different interests, especially the unique way that Rockcliffe Park's Heritage Conservation District Plan is outlined. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you say, there are only very few properties. I think 10 or 12. It's a bit hard to calculate because hardly any of those actually are accessible from Hemlock. There are only 4, I believe, accessible from Hemlock. There's potential, I think, in various properties along that road and in other parts of Rockcliffe for expansion, for homes to be bigger, for homes to grow, for additional dwelling units, for coach houses. I think that is a discussion to be had maybe, and I think there are these tools in place. But I think that the 4-story designation could very, very significantly alter that forest. It would create a hard edge that would lose that forest feel, and that would be theoretically could ever generate, I don't know, a few dozen at best new residences. So in the overall picture, it's really neither here nor there. It doesn't help the city to achieve the housing goals. I think it's misguided, but the community and the public realm has a lot to lose. So it is not a smart approach.
I appreciate some of those comments, especially since the plan is unique in the sense that it does recognize green space and the canopy, which is very unique. A motion is being brought forward to remove 550 and 560 Maple Lane East from the proposed 4-story designation, recognizing that they don't front onto Hemlock and that 550 is a contributing heritage property. Do you see this at least as a helpful step? And are there other parts of the minor corridor designation that you still feel need to be reevaluated?
Well, yes. I mean, it's certainly a welcome that first step, and that is a good, I think, starting point for that discussion. But obviously, one of those properties is Grade 1 listed, and therefore could never be subject to demolition and 4-story development. And the other property is much smaller and might or might not. I can't comment on that, whether that would also eventually a 4-story development potential there. But with those being taken out of that run of 6 or 8 homes is definitely a step in the right direction. But the 4 homes that are accessible from Hemlock, I think, are definitely a primary concern.
And finally, the motion also asks staff to consider the new heritage-related policies in section 4.1 of the secondary plan when drafting the new zoning bylaw. Based on your concerns, do you believe that's enough to protect the character of this unique stretch of Hemlock, or are stronger and more specific tools needed?
Sorry, with regard to which element is providing the
Section
protection?
4.1.
Remind me what that exactly says.
Of the secondary plan related to ensuring compatibility with the heritage values and attributes of the HCD.
Yeah, I think Susan Aquino, who's next to me, will talk next. I think she will cover that. I'm less familiar with that particular wording of that right now.
Okay. Appreciate that, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'm just trying to figure out who's got their hand up. Oh, that's Ralston. Ralston has spoken. I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you very much. Susan, you're up.
Yes, now it is Susan D'Aquino. Thank you. I know that that people in Rockcliffe certainly share the concerns that Daniel has given voice to. I wanted to set, after what Scott had to say and what Daniel's had to say, I want to set a little bit more of the context, which we think is so important. As you know, the Planning Act requires that all decisions affecting planning matters shall be consistent with the provincial planning statement. And I haven't heard it mentioned today, but the provincial planning statement says clearly that protected heritage property shall be conserved, and Rockcliffe Park is a protected heritage property. It adds, in fact, that planning authorities are encouraged to develop and implement proactive strategies for conserving significant heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes, such as Rockcliffe Park. Now, what has always struck me is that heritage conservation districts in Ottawa occupy a tiny fraction of the land area of the city. We've asked heritage staff if they've calculated that, and they have not, but we know it is really tiny. And so we submit that heritage districts can be protected readily, easily, and fully without in any way impeding the larger quest for intensification. And we think that the unequivocal provision in the provincial planning statement that requires that these heritage resources shall be conserved can be respected. Now, let me focus a little bit on Hemlock Road, now declared a minor corridor. As Daniel has said, it borders both Rockcliffe Park, a National Historic Site on one side of the road, and another National Historic Site on the other, namely Beechwood National Cemetery. Both of these are green oases, forming a green tunnel as you drive along, quite unlike anything anywhere else, and certainly unlike anything else called a minor corridor. Minor corridors are magnets for intensification, and we think that this is totally inappropriate for this particular roadway. Just because it joins Saint Laurent Boulevard and Beechwood Avenue is not enough to ignore the character of Hemlock. We think that its unique character should not be disregarded. It should not be designated a minor corridor. Now, staff have added proposed changes to the Rockcliffe secondary plan, which your question was about, Councillor, that say that intensification is encouraged to be achieved through context-sensitive infill that meets the objectives of our heritage plan and conserves the heritage value and attributes. Now, the fact of the matter is that such language as encouraged to be achieved, in our experience, never achieves its objectives. It's even weaker than should be achieved. The only thing that might be helpful is shall be achieved. It's the only possible hope. That's one thing. The proposed language, though, immediately goes on to specify the maximum building heights shall not exceed 6 stories along one part of the road and 4 along the rest. We submit that there is no way that such heights can ever be context sensitive. Where multi-units are now permitted, the new buildings are 2 stories. The increased density, that is context sensitive, and it provides increased density because they're allowed multiple units, and the rest of Rockcliffe Park, only one other part is. Just now, this is something that I think is really interesting. I know you're not listening, but very much, but I know it's pretty tiring. Just 2 years ago, city lawyers joined us in vigorously opposing a proposal by Smart Living, if you want to know, to demolish 5 modest-sized homes on Beechwood and replace them with 2 apartment buildings, one of them 4 stories, the other 5. The city's decision to refuse this was appealed. At the appeal, the city outlined the numerous ways that the proposal for that was at odds with the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan, saying in summary that the proposed buildings did not provide for adequate respect for our heritage plan and were not sympathetic to the traditional, natural, and cultural environment. They mentioned 5 ways that it violated our heritage plan and 2 ways that it violated the guidelines that Canada has for conservation of historic places in Canada. So all of a sudden, our secondary plan is being changed to allow all that when the city just 2 years ago said violation, 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 and refused it. Now, we lost at the OLT. We in the city lost. I would love to summarize the arguments of the proponent, but time will not permit. Suffice it to say that he argued that our heritage plan is
Susan,
nothing.
you are out of time. Did you have a sentence or two to conclude?
Okay. He said that our heritage plan is nothing but guidelines like suggestions. They are not binding. And as well, he argued that the only thing that counts is the zoning bylaw because it is a more recent date than our heritage plan. The heritage plan, he said, could be ignored. We were shocked
Susan,
that the
that
OLT went
was
along
your
with. It
2
was a huge
sentences.
setback.
Thank you very much. I'm
and
going
we
to cut
don't
you
want
off
more of
there.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the delegate?
Just the comments. I wanted to thank the members from the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association for attending today, and also thank Susan for answering the question that I had initially posed to David or to Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you for your presentation today. We're going to move on to the Paul section of the delegate list. First, we'll have Paul Goodkey, and then Paul Johannes will speak in his capacity with the FCA, and then Paul Johannes will speak in his capacity with the Green Space Alliance. So, Paul Goodkey, I understand you're online.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate this opportunity. I want all the councillors to realize our association has been engaged. We've met with staff April 24th. We've responded with comments on May the 3rd. Amendments were made. On May 30th, I sent a letter to the staff. And when I attended on June the 2nd at the open house, along with Phyllis, there wasn't very many people there. You know, it's like not too many people realize that these changes are major changes, and the changes to our secondary plan in Old Ottawa East are real major changes. So I had a good half an hour of opportunity to talk with staff at the open house, and was told, you've made good points. But to this date, that good point has not been addressed. So on June the 6th, we sent, the Old Ottawa East Community Association sent another letter of objection and comments. And on June 15th, that's like Sunday, we get a response. That's last Sunday, we get a response. And we're making progress. We're making progress. But and then immediately on June 16th, I stay up all night, I send another response. So we are making progress, and I think it behooves councillors to realize that we are making progress, and there is debate, and there are changes being made. Our secondary plan was, reviewed back in 2021. It was finalized in November 2021. Changes were made. we agreed with the changes. What could we do? That was it. The Ministry of MA, whatever it is, the province approved the secondary plan in November 2022. So here we are all of a sudden with a PPS that, whoa, I don't understand why we have to have these, like they are major changes. And we need more time. We need more time to consult. And as John Dance said, I mean, the community should know what's going on, not just a few of us that have been involved in the planning committee and understand the, you know, how important our secondary plan is. We've got great intensification going on here, and it's going in the right place. So I would hope the councillors realize that, you know, there needs to be more time to get this right. We haven't even got to look at the verbiage changes, because the verbiage has to be amended. And what I saw was just, I don't even know what it is. So we need more time. I hope that that will be the direction that council and councillors give for our secondary plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menard.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, I wanted to thank Paul and the Old Ottawa East Community Association for their engagement. And just, I do agree with them that, yes, progress has been made. And yes, some more time is probably warranted for consultation with communities in this process. I would urge the committee to look at that, working with staff in collaboration. I've been really pleased with our back and forth, and I think there's a bit more to be done there. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Menard. I'm just trying to see if there are any further questions for the delegate, and there are not. Paul, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Paul Johannes 1, then Paul Johannes 2, and then Jason Burgraff.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm speaking now on behalf of the Federation of Citizens Associations. We appreciate the project team's outreach concerning the amendments for PPS 2024 consistency. But the proposed amendments are major amendments, and community associations, as we've been hearing now, expect and deserve more time for public consultation and engagement, especially regarding the changes to secondary plans in certain communities. Community association volunteers have been engaged with city staff on a continuing basis on this. Staff have made a number of changes, and we've heard many motions today regarding changes that could be made, should be made. And as we've heard, there's progress being made. It's not a stalemate, but there's just more time that's required to get it right. So as we first requested, we once again request that the timeline for these major amendments to the secondary plans, such as the Old Ottawa East secondary plan and secondary plans of other severely impacted communities, be extended, allowing for further engagement. And we've seen, you know, which communities are the ones that have height increases, permissions that have been changed on lands that are designated upper corridor. But every place has some kind of peculiarity. Staff can't be on top of everything at all times. So this is just a case where we need a bit more time to work together to find the right solutions for these issues. This is dealing with the secondary plans. Otherwise, concerning the delineation of the MTSAs, the major transit station areas, a question there is that there's a uniform radius of 800 meters was selected by staff for delineating the catchment areas for these MTSAs. Now we find that the impact on neighborhoods of selecting such a wide radius was not fully analyzed for certain MTSAs. Some residents are asking why staff did not choose a radius of 500 meters, because that whole range is optional under the PPS 2024. So there are other cases here where maybe the MTSAs could be looked at with a 500-meter radius instead. We agree with staff's pragmatic and efficient approach to remove the hypothetical future MTSAs from Schedule C1 and to retain only existing and funded MTSAs that have a high degree of certainty. As for strategic growth areas, we agree that these are, effectively correspond to the hub and corridor designations set out in the official plan. Looking forward, though, we hope that the review of housing needs and supply will be carried out in the next official plan update. Ensure that the developments in the strategic growth areas do not result in oversupply or reduced choice of housing options, and that supportive infrastructure, both social and physical, is adequate to accommodate the planned growth in hubs and corridors. Quality of life and livability we depend on it, and also our ability to achieve Ottawa's vision of becoming the most livable mid-sized city in North America depends on having that balance right. We look forward to the release of the inclusionary housing framework for protected hubs. And we can see the city is really stuck here between navigating, top-down provincial mandates and on-the-ground realities faced by the communities. Now, the city has addressed many of the concerns raised by the FCA, but there's still some broad issues remaining unresolved, and that's a bit more fully developed in the written submission that we've made as well. So that concludes my presentation with respect to the FCA.
Thank you very much, Paul. I don't see any questions for you. This will be another week and a half, I guess, before it gets to City Council, or another week. And I would encourage you, if there is the potential for real progress, just to continue working on that, because this is not the final kick at the can, but obviously the time is short. Do you want to roll into your presentation on behalf of the Green Space Alliance?
Sure, thank you. I'm Paul Johannes again, and I'm the chair of the Green Space Alliance of Canada's capital. So I'll be speaking to you this time about a different matter before you today, the now permitted private requests for urban expansion, which is also something that's coming forward through this PPS 2024 compliance exercise. When this was first proposed in Bill 185, we did not object to it. We saw maybe that there was an advantage to having such requests examined one at a time, rather than as part of a tsunami of such claims that come forward in a comprehensive review. So it could provide for more transparency and improved opportunity for engagement on the rationale and the need for any expansion. That depends on how much public information is provided by the city about these private applications. Like, we know a number have been received now, but it's not easy to find out which. So we would request that a public list of private applications be posted on the city website, and that notification of new applications be sent to subscribers to that list. Something that we suggest be in place. Now, some of you will recall that in the last comprehensive review, the Green Space Alliance and many of its partners was a strong proponent for the no expansion scenario. And that is still our position in the face of private applications. So in the last round, using the same methodology and data as the city, we demonstrated that the full range of projected dwellings could be provided through intensification and vacant greenfields already in the urban area, if 64% of the new growth was allocated to intensification, rather than the timid 51% in the balanced scenario recommended by staff and approved by council. The potential for growth through intensification has been supercharged since then, thanks to provincial and federal policy changes and incentives reflected in the official plan amendments that you're considering today. The official plan monitoring report presented this morning at Planning and Housing Committee reveals that the share of new growth through intensification shot up to 69% in the first 2 years under the new official plan, blasting through the 45% target. And that's before the new provincial and federal measures are fully rolled out. So the potential is there to achieve really a no expansion scenario in every round going forward, even with private applications coming forward. Because in the end, the choice of that allocation percentage is not directed. That allocation percentage in the growth management exercise that is starting now is really entirely in your hands. It's the single most impactful decision that'll determine whether we continue to sprawl and more rural land is converted to urban, or if we hold the line. We still, consider that urban expansion is no longer a viable growth management strategy in the context of climate change, green space preservation, and fiscal responsibility.
Paul, thank you very much for that. I don't see any questions for you from members. Thank you very much for the presentation, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's a crystal clear camera he's got. That's good. Jason, and then followed by Ms. Mellons.
Good afternoon, everybody. You may recall 2 months ago, I spoke in front of this joint committee concerned about the speed that this work was going to be proposed to be undertaken. And it was, we shared a bit of an inside joke that it was ironic that I was asking to take longer on something. But that concern really remains the same today. And there are 2 reasons behind that. One, none of the changes proposed in OPA 46 or 47 promote or facilitate more housing. And 2, and more importantly, the items we highlight in our written submissions actively work against the provision of more housing, both in the built-up and the rural areas of the city. As detailed in our submission on OPA 46, changes to section 3.1 do not provide for a reasonable assessment of a private boundary expansion, nor do they, and they reserve all lands adjacent to highways for employment areas without being properly designated. Changes to section 3.4 do not allow the possibility of hooking up to village services in the land swap. Changes to section 4.5.1 try to reintroduce a municipal heritage register for non-designated properties. A new section 4.13 designates the entire rural area as protected for the agricultural system, which impacts all rural landowners and will add time and cost to any rural development by allowing the city to demand an agricultural impact assessment for any new or expanding non-agricultural use in the rural countryside designation. And changes to section 11.6 limits flexibility to modify site-specific boundaries between the downtown, interurban, and outer urban transects. Of itself, OPA 47 brings over the technical studies from the Development Application Study Policy Bylaw into the OP without any consideration for the intention or the spirit of the provincial government's Bill 17, the installation of a new GM of planning, or the Mayor's Housing Innovation Task Force work. Finally, the proposals in Omnibus 3 generally pertaining to Volume 2 of the OP are acceptable, but for some reason, they include changes to Section 7.3 in Volume 1 that would only allow lot line adjustments and site alterations for significant wetlands and natural environmental areas for nonprofit developments and not for market developments that house 90% of the population. None of the changes in OPA 46 or 47 are necessary to approve today. And as I said, many of them, including one buried in Omnibus 3, actively work against getting more housing. I urge all of you, but especially the members of ARAC, because there are some significant ramifications for the rural area of Ottawa here, to defer decision on these items until concerns can be resolved. I'd also, since we had a chance to respond to some of the comments made, I'd disagree with the assertion that these changes need to happen in order for the city to be able to consider urban boundary applications or to move ahead with the new zoning bylaw. Many of these changes don't impact zoning at all. And then I'd like to wrap by speaking to the motions. I don't typically talk to specific projects at all. We focus on citywide policies. There's a very important reason for that. But what I would comment is that we don't help ourselves if we support reductions in height, in density, or reverse proposed changes to go back to the status quo. Such measures do not support our housing goals, and they don't respect OP policies for more density. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burgraff. I don't see any questions for you. I guess I am just struck. We've had 2 delegations now who have spoken to us about the imposition of much greater density than had been anticipated in their communities, and there's going to be a point in between, and I hope that it's the in between that our staff have found. But I'm not allowed to debate here, so I'll leave it there. Oh, I'm sorry. I do see a hand up from Councillor Curry. Councillor Curry.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Just to Jason, so there was a presentation today that said, Toronto's not going the same way we're going. London's not either. I'm wondering if you have a comment on that, because your comment is that we don't need to rush this. We can wait, we can defer, delay, whatever. Would you say that's what other municipalities have done? I mean, I'm going based on what a delegation was telling us.
Yeah, I would agree that with the one of the delegations that I have not also seen any municipalities moving ahead like this. The question came forward of, is there a statutory deadline to kind of impose this? I'm not aware of such a deadline from the province or any reason that we need to move ahead in this manner as either. So we don't see the rush for it. I mean, it's maybe different from why the community associations don't see the rush for it, but funnily we are ending at the same result.
All right, thanks for that. I'll have some questions for staff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jason, I don't see any other hands up. I do wonder if those other jurisdictions, though, are at risk of doing what I think our staff are concerned about, which is falling further and further behind on the relevance of the secondary plan to their official plans and to the newest provincial policy statement. The difficulty I've had as the councillor in Kitchissippi is secondary plans that are 15 years old and not worth the paper they're written on anymore, obviously. But it doesn't sound like you're necessarily fully conversant with what some of those other jurisdictions may be doing at the time.
Not to that level of that rationale.
Okay. Fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ursula Mellons, you are our final public delegation. I think you're online.
Just trying to, you can hear me. Oh, here we go. There's video.
We are having a very hard time hearing you.
Okay, let me.
You're audible, but it's garbled and underwater.
1 second. Is that any better if I speak more clearly and slowly?
Are members good with that? Yeah, we can do that now. Thank you.
I'm going to ask for a little bit of indulgence in terms of time because I am speaking on behalf of 4 clients. I encourage you to read our written submissions. And I do agree with what Mr. Burgraff just said, that in terms of more time is required. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and address OPA 46. As we know, these are amendments to the official plan in order to bring the OP into consistency with the 2024 PPS. But I would actually say that the amendment OPA 46 does not necessarily go far enough. It does not include all of the amendments that the city should be making. And so just one point, a very obvious point, is the PPS does direct that at the time of each official plan update, the city needs to make sure that there is land available to accommodate a time horizon of 20 years. And this official plan amendment does not do that. It does not update the growth numbers in the OP. As a matter of fact, staff have very consistently and clearly said they're going to stick with the current numbers in the OP. The 2021 official plan, as adopted by council, relied on 2019 numbers. This official plan amendment should be updating those numbers. And I would say it's not appropriate for an OP update that's purporting to bring the OP into consistency with the PPS can exclude making updates that are required. And I do realize that the next item on the agenda is going to outline the time frame for that. And staff are proposing coming back in Q1 of 2026 and then to council again in Q1 of 2027, then to the minister. Interestingly enough, I don't believe staff, it should take that long. Having worked on several OPs over the years, there are numbers that are available to staff and that could be done more quickly. But just to recap quickly, I'm going to get into some specific comments on OPA 46. The interchange policies that Jason did reference, this is a new section. So this is protection for industrial and logistics at interchanges. This policy will have the effect of freezing land uses to protect for future uses, but yet the geographic definition of these areas has not been established. So that's a very key detail that should be known before this policy goes forward. The country lot swap policies, you've heard references. We do thank staff. There have certainly been revisions from what was first proposed in April and May to the most recent draft that we received last week, but yet there still remains an inconsistency in the policies. So if requiring country lot development that's transferred adjacent to a village to remain on private services is contrary to the official plan, it's inconsistent with the PPS. We should be encouraging village services to be used there. So that's another point that we want to further discuss. Agricultural systems, Jason did mention this, but it's important to emphasize the agricultural systems approach in the PPS is certainly there, but that's not a significant change from 2020 to 2024 in the PPS. And yet the new policies proposed in 4.13 will have a very significant effect of limiting or even prohibiting a range of rural land uses in the agricultural area. It's not going to further protect prime agricultural areas. Those are under the agricultural resource area designation, but the ag system policies proposed in 4.13, we believe will have the corresponding impact of reducing other rural land uses beyond agricultural. Again, we need more time to discuss the implementation of these policies, what the policies should be in order to protect agricultural lands, but still permitting other rural uses. Very quickly, I agree with the submission of Jason with respect to transect boundaries, NEA boundaries. There's no planning justification or reason as to why it should only be the city that can amend these boundaries. A private application might require an amendment to a natural environment area. So there's no reason for that restriction to be contained in the OP. Again, we'd like to further discuss that. So, we do suggest that more time is required to actually finesse and revise the policies that are proposed, so that the OP policies will actually serve the needs of the city and be consistent with the PPS. So those are, just going to check here. Overall, we do think this should be deferred so that the matters can be refined. The OPA 46 does not satisfy all elements of the consistency standard that the PPS does require. And in anticipation of a question and responding to questions that have been asked, I am not aware of any time frame within which an OP must be updated in order to be consistent with the PPS. It's not directed in the Planning Act. It's not directed in the PPS. The PPS itself does actually contain a policy that says even if an official plan has not been updated, decisions must still be consistent with the PPS. I'm going from memory, that's policy 6.1 sub 7. It's in 6.1, but I think it's sub 7. So lastly, OPA 47, we do not recommend going forward at this time. As staff have said, minister's written approval is required before the actual change, which is including studies into the OP, can be made. So those are my comments, subject to any questions.
Thank you very much for those. I know I haven't received an answer back yet from staff, but I'm interested in the response to the letter that I think you and perhaps a colleague sent yesterday with respect to the requirement to update the population numbers in order to be truly consistent with the PPS. So that's a question that I'll be posing. And I don't see any questions from members at this point. So thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon. Okay, I think that is the end of the public delegations. Bear with me a second, folks, sorry. That is, all right. So what I'm going to propose, colleagues, there are a number of councillors who have put forward motions that are not technical in nature, but advancing a change that they'd like to see. So I just want to give those councillors an opportunity to tell us what their motions mean in plain language. Councillor Dudas, can you address your motion first off?
Yes, Chair, I'd be happy to. The situation as it stands is that Blackburn Hamlet is it's within the Greenbelt. It's completely surrounded by Greenbelt property as well as the Lafarge Quarry. And back when the official plan was being determined, there was a conversation among staff as well as I'm sure council at the time about where does this kind of very unique neighborhood sit within the official plan. And it was deemed that it was part of the outer urban transect. Although historically its stature as a neighborhood is actually more aligned with the suburban transect as well as its built form. What has happened is, obviously we've seen the proposed changes through the zoning policy. It means that not only would Blackburn Hamlet be subject to the outer urban transect density, it would also have the conditions of the evolving neighborhood overlay, which basically means in common parlance that although it is exactly like a suburban neighborhood in terms of built form and context, it would see the density and the changes that would be more akin to something off of, say, Maryville or a Montreal Road, some of the bigger urban centers. Now, the reason why I say that Blackburn's a bit unique is because anybody who's been there would know that we are very, very fortunate in terms of having the green belt and the beauty of it surrounding Blackburn, but it's also a massive constraint. It puts a stranglehold on the community because due to the proximity of the Greenbelt and the NCC being the overlying authority of what happens through that Greenbelt, it means that we can't put a single road in. It means that I cannot widen those said roads that do exist to add an HOV lane. It means that when there's work that is done on any infrastructure, we have to get the rubber stamp from the NCC. And it generally means that we have to follow the exact same footprint as already exists in a community that was built back in the late 60s, early 70s. So what that all means is that if we see density that we cannot adapt to, the city can never put in the infrastructure to accommodate the not only cars, but added buses and transit. We cannot put a sidewalk in. We cannot put in additional park space because we have what is both a blessing and a curse called the Greenbelt. So what I am asking here is that the community of Blackburn Hamlet, which is literally, it's about 25 meters away from the closest suburban community, be considered as part of that suburban transect, so that although it will see density, and my community is very much aware of that, it will see density, and it will see density predominantly along the major artery, which is Innes Road, which runs through Blackburn Hamlet. It will not be so overcome by it that it cannot accommodate the growth in terms of infrastructure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Dudas. City staff, could we anticipate that you have any objection to this motion or?
Chair, it's difficult for staff to be in a position to support it. I won't say that we're objecting to it, but on the scale of support, it's not something that we're in a position to support at this time, in that it hasn't been widely circulated, and the designations within the outer urban and the suburban and how we got to those transect definitions are similar, but differentiated based on time of construction. And while there's a bit of a gray or overlap, the opinion of staff is that the timing of that construction is more aligned with the outer urban than it would be for the suburban context. But I guess that if that provides context from a staff perspective.
Yeah, so I'm not hearing a major objection of any sort, but I do hear the inability to support. Councillor Curry, you put forward a motion, I think, on Councillor Gower's behalf. Are you comfortable speaking to his intent there?
Not really.
Okay. We shall glean the meaning from the whereas clauses. Thank you for that. And then Councillor Curry put forward a motion with respect to Faircrest Heights, Riverview Park secondary plan. Councillor Carr, I believe that's yours. Did you want to delve into that one a bit?
Yeah, can I delve into that a little bit and speak to staff, and can I speak to a little bit more than just the motion?
So if you'd like, what I can do is, I was hoping just to get a brief description of what the motion actually does.
Okay.
Just, I'm trying to get a bunch of those out of the way, off the top, just so people know what the questions are.
Okay, but I'll be able to speak.
So you will be able to speak as many times as you'd like and at whatever length you wish.
Okay, all the way to 7 p.m. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I exaggerate a bit.
Yeah, so worked carefully with staff on changes to the secondary plan that were proposed. I'll also add that staff even came to my community to see what actually meant. So basically there's a change to the amount of height that's allowed on the minor corridors. It was going to be proposed to be 6 stories. In discussions with staff and with development industry, they all clearly said no one's going to build 6 stories there. We want to make sure that we are having intensification that works in my community the way that it's structured. And so there was movement to reflect a specific amendment at 1245 Kilbourne, which is 3.5 hectares in site and can serve as a hub. It is not 1 hectare in site as the original documents indicated. So that was corrected and we were able to find density within there that is quite walkable to the Pleasant Park major transit station area. Some of the other concerns that arose was just in terms of the Pleasant Park major transit station area had almost the same required densities as the Billings Bridge, but you get 2,000 bus stops a day at Billings Bridge and less than 100 at Pleasant Park. So the shift really made a lot of sense in terms of where it's located. And so also it changes the minimum density target of 80 dwellings per net hectare along Pleasant Park and Kilbourne. We also extended additional commercial permissions consistent with the secondary plan along Alta Vista Drive, and that's where commercial development is naturally sort of occurring. We got our 2nd fruit stand there this week, so that's pretty exciting for my community. We changed section 2, policy 3, with respect to auto-oriented uses. So essentially it's just a shift in density. It meets all the density targets of the PPS by expanding permissions along Alta Vista Drive, which wasn't considered in the secondary plan before, keeping the limits of 4 stories along Pleasant Park and Kilbourne, and then designating the area of 1245 Kilbourne as around as a hub that has tremendous development potential on the 3.5 hectares.
Okay, so and just to make sure I understand it, you're shifting some of the density from Pleasant Park to Alta Vista, but overall maintaining the density within your ward?
But all about overall retaining, pardon me, I didn't.
The density?
Yeah,
So you're
the
not
density
losing,
is retained.
it's just transferred from Pleasant Park to Alta Vista?
Yeah, and staff wrote the motions. I'm not that smart to be able to put that all together. I think that's what took up a big chunk of the overtime that Roy spoke to.
Sounds good. Do we expect to hear any major objection from city staff on that one?
Chair, no, just to clarify, the density shift would be going to 1245 Kilbourne from Pleasant Park and Kilbourne Avenue.
Okay.
Staff has no objections to the motion.
That's helpful. Thank you. And then Councillor Carr, with respect to the motion on Riverview and Pleasant Park MTSAs?
I kind of lumped it all together.
You put it all together,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. Same answer from staff then.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor King, I think you explained some of it in the course of speaking with the delegates, but in a sentence or two, what does your motion accomplish?
Yeah, so the motion just seeks a balance that prioritizes heritage preservation and neighborhood integrity in terms of geographic logic and street character. The properties at 550 and 560 Maple Lane East have their primary frontage on Maple Lane East, not Hemlock Road. The Hemlock minor corridor designation is specifically intended for properties that relate to and take access from Hemlock Road, and including properties that front onto a different street undermines the geographic logic of the corridor approach and creates planning inconsistencies. We're also ensuring that the contributing property, which is 555 Maple Lane, is respected in terms of its importance to the heritage, character, and integrity of the district.
Thank you. So, sorry, just I want to make sure I understand it. 550 and 560 Maple Lane, under this exercise, were proposed to go to 4 stories. This would maintain them at 2. Perfect. Thank you. Do we expect to hear any major objections from staff on that one? I doubt it.
Chair, staff supports the motion.
Amazing. Councillor Menard, You have a motion with respect to revisions to Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan amendments. Are you able to describe in a couple of sentences what that largely accomplishes?
Yes, Chair. Essentially, staff had gone through and discussed with Old Ottawa East Community Association and myself some early revisions, which they had made. The Old Ottawa East Community Association sent along some further requests for revisions. Staff accepted some of those, did not accept others of those. The motion that's reflected right now is only the agreement of the Community Association, our office, and city staff. And so it's drafted by staff, appreciate their work. There is still a lot of density being added in this area. It doesn't take that portion away. Some of it has been shifted, but this is these are changes that we've agreed to after significant back and forth in internal meetings.
And I'm sorry, so do the changes represent a decrease in proposed density in some areas?
No, they don't. The changes that are in front of committee today are agreed changes for city staff based on the Main Street characterization of Main Street, as well as other main streets within Old Ottawa East.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't understand what the motion accomplishes compared to the staff recommendations that are in front of us today, but.
Chair, there were six, I think there were 6 items that Old Ottawa East sent back. A couple of them were accepted by staff as changes that made sense to them. That's what the motion is. Staff could better speak to exactly what they've accepted, but they are fairly minor changes that I think make sense.
Okay, so this is whatever these changes are, staff are supportive of them?
Chair, that's correct. Just to provide a little bit of context to assist the councillor, staff has taken a look at what the secondary plan is trying to achieve and the changes from what was originally in the documentation before this committee really fine tunes those permissions. For example, instead of a 9-story wall on one street, we're considering a 4-story base where the mid and upper portions would use the angular plane. So it really is more context sensitive to the specific parts of the secondary plan.
Okay, thank you for that. There is the motion, Councillor Brockington. What is the effect of your motion?
So a net increase of 3 stories for literally one parcel of land. What staff are proposing for Prince of Wales between Baseline and Dines is an upgrade of 6 stories, part of the main street. There are 3 streets getting attention in the northern part of Carlton Heights, the neighborhood. And if you know the Hogsback area, we have a number of skyscrapers, 6 or 7 skyscrapers, quite tall. And as you head to the north, there is this parcel of land at the intersection of Dines, 1335 Prince of Wales, which is proposing to go up to 9 and then a gradual transition northbound to 6. So right now there's an abandoned schoolhouse. There was a fire a couple of weeks ago. There is some ideas to propose this site. 9 is the happy equilibrium that we've got to, and that's why that's being proposed, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And I'm guessing staff aren't going to object to that?
Staff supports the motion.
Sorry?
Staff supports the motion.
Supports the motion, thank you. Councillor Judas's motion has been gone through. And then the ordinance corridor secondary plan, I think, is correctly characterized as a technical amendment.
That's correct, Chair. We wish to have 100 dwellings per net hectare is the goal, not 10.
Amazing. Councillor Curry, questions of staff?
Yeah, I really just want to ask on Councillor Gower's motion. It's so basically, I mean, I wasn't about to present it or anything for Councillor Gower, but he's asking for a report, a review of the TMP, the IMP, and the AMP after you have a population projection. To me, that sounds like a major undertaking. Remember, I was just the reader of the motion, but I'm just wondering, like, is that not a lot of work? A review of the TMP, a review of the IMP and the AMP. To me, that sounds like a massive request based on what he's trying to get at as the infrastructure needs.
So, Chair, that is correct. It is a big review, but it is something that staff does undertake after our population projections and growth updates are provided. We look at the implementing master plans to see what infrastructure, whether it's piped or transportation, is required to support that growth. The Gower motion is really speaking to, in addition to that work that staff would normally be doing, for those secondary plans where council has adopted amendments to increase the potential development, have consideration for the timelines of when that construction might occur with that increase of development, when we are providing sort of that review into the IMP, TMP, and AMP.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you would be doing it anyway, but there's another component that you think is important, so you would support this.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. First of all, thank you to staff. I know this was a massive piece of work. I just wanted to address something very specific to my ward in Centertown. I had some conversations with staff when we discussed this, and I'm still a little puzzled as to why heights of 27 stories are being allowed on small side streets like in Nepean and not being proposed for Kent Street, where it's still listed as 9 stories. And as anyone who's on planning committee knows, we've had multiple huge applications on Kent Street. There's high rises going up there anyway. So why not concentrate the density on Kent Street? Why? I know that there are a few areas where you removed the 27 stories on some Centertown side streets, but I'm still having a lot of difficulty with this because I really don't understand the rationale between higher heights on side streets and lower heights on a major arterial road. Thanks.
So, Chair, compared to the original circulation, I'll start and I'll invite Mr. Dubé to also provide some additional context as the file lead for that secondary plan. We looked at the future growth areas of hubs, main streets, and minor corridors, and where there were evolving neighborhood or neighborhood designations in between, staff proposed some increases just to provide that continuity from higher height permissions down to the lower height permissions. But I believe after the circulation, after receiving comments, after meeting with the community association, we walked back some of those proposed amendments to really just reflect what could be accomplished within those designations.
Okay, I know I appreciate that and the community appreciates that, but it still doesn't answer my question about Kent. Why did you not just go for it with Kent with 27 stories? Because every application that I've seen on that road has been over 27 stories in the last 3 years.
So again, if it doesn't have the right designation, that wasn't part of the scope of this review. If it's a neighborhood or evolving neighborhood, we would have left it at that designation.
Okay, I think maybe for urban communities, that points to a flaw to me in this system because I value the hub designation. I think it's really important, but we still have a situation here where we're cramming much higher density on smaller streets, and I have a huge arterial that is not only ripe for high rises, it's getting them anyway, and it seems silly to make those folks come to committee. If we're redoing our zoning anyway, and if it makes sense to put density on this arterial road and it's happening there anyway, it just doesn't make any sense to me that those heights are still left at 9 stories in comparison to those smaller streets. But, I don't have a motion on it or anything like that. I just think we're going to continue to see applications on Kent Street for high rises because that's where they're all going in the neighborhood. So it seems kind of silly to not do that at this point, but thank you very much for your work. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to support motions from my colleagues here because you all know your communities better than I do. But I'll just say from the perspective of Centertown, we're very happy to see other wards taking more density. We're running out of land. We need to put people somewhere. And I represent the most densely populated. My ward is 6 kilometers square and it has the same population in many of your wards that are much, much bigger. So I'm glad we're taking this journey together. And to any residents in suburban wards that are worried about density, there's lots of great things that come with it too, I promise. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So depending on my time, I might go on again to ask questions about the motions on the floor, but just to pull back a little bit on some of the questions that we heard from delegates before they all fall out of my brain. Why did the city choose an 800-meter radius in their formulas for designating these protected areas?
Mr. Dubé, do you want to take that question?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So the PPS requires that municipalities delineate MTSAs as a 500 to 800 meter radius. And this is the same requirement that was in the A Place to Grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And in that growth plan, it specifies a 10-minute walk, which our OP equates to 800-meter walking distance. So we've gone with an 800-meter walking distance, which will, in most cases, fall between the 500 and 800 meters.
Okay, great. Thank you. And can you help me to understand a common question that I have is why are we, are we not doing enough to see the growth that we need for the city of Ottawa to meet the targets set by the province and by our growth projections? Are we not zoning for greater density than what we really need to? And so why aren't we, only exclusively doing greater zoning, let's say within the downtown core or within the green belt, let's say, where it is more affordable for us to do so, and leave everybody else alone?
So, Chair, the official plan is increasing development potential throughout the urban area, from the downtown core all the way to suburban areas, mostly by designation as well. The official plan, the municipalities only play one role in the actual construction of that development. There has to be, the market has to be right. The builders and the developers also have to have their ducks in a row in order to make projects happen as well. And you also find that as we go from the core to the outer urban area and suburban areas, there's also that notion of those houses are newer as you go further out, which means they're not really as ready to turn over at a certain period of time. It'll take a little bit longer for the market conditions to be right for those properties to see a little bit something more than what we're seeing today.
So the idea is that through this exercise, you're going to create the greatest amount of permissions. And then as neighborhoods evolve, there will be greater incentive for builders to take advantage of the permissions that you're giving them.
That is correct. We're aligning that growth potential as much as we can along what we call strategic growth areas, which we went over that concept today, but also other examples would be around transit stations and how do we plan for those people and jobs around those transit stations.
Okay, so as one of the wards that is now going to be seeing 3 secondary plans starting to take shape in 2025, 2026, one of the questions that was coming up from the stakeholder group was, whether or not we have population projections or population targets when we're creating these secondary plans. Is that ever a factor considered when you're doing those secondary plans?
So, Chair, we tend to look at what we call the build-out condition for secondary plans. So you could have a target, but because of market uncertainty, you may not know when that population and development would be achieved. So we look at the overall, what would this community, how would it be built out? What are we planning for? And that also helps with looking at our infrastructure and what are our needs and timing of those infrastructures and needs as well.
So again, these exercises are creating the permissions for the types of emerging housing needs and population changes that could occur over time. And we do them around transit stations, not only because the province is asking us to, but because it creates a better efficiency for our dollars and our spending with infrastructure demands. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that also gives us an opportunity to, fine tune some of the infrastructure within a secondary plan. So for example, at Algonquin Station, we have a new station there, but how are we going to get people living in the area connected, walking, biking, et cetera, to that station? And there's an opportunity to also fine tune that mobility network to provide more access to that station.
I certainly, have been at enough planning and housing committee meetings where residents have come forward to discuss, as we've heard today, very recently approved secondary plans that are feeling violated by some of the new needs around that area. And I I very much empathize with those feelings. You know, a community will undertake a tremendous amount of work to try and put their best foot forward, to try and make what they consider to be reasonable concessions to the existing neighborhood that they love. And from there, to see that change, especially, you know, through another level of government, perhaps, it can feel very destabilizing. And so I really empathize with that. I've been saying that we're in the best place in College Ward because luckily our secondary plans are starting now. So we'll have a very tiny window where we're going to be very aligned with the zoning bylaw and the official plan and perhaps our new projections from the Ministry of Finance. So we're going to have the truth for hopefully a longer period of time than some of these other secondary plans might. One of the things that I did was put a limitation section on the website of these secondary plans that clearly states all of the ways that those secondary plans can change, because I think there has been a perhaps limited understanding or a frustration with the fact that these things that are supposed to take precedent over an official plan, in fact, fall short sometimes when push comes to shove. So that's something I've been glad to do. Finally, I suppose I've lost my train of thought, obviously. I was on a really good roll there, but I think I'll get back on when I have something else to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair. Just hopefully I'll be quick. I first really want to thank Councillor Curry for reading in those motions. It was lovely to hear her voice for about 10 minutes. It was just following the declaration that Royce made, talking about the number of hours of overtime that staff put in. And I can assure you that despite my joke that they were working on the motion, that actually that represents just a tiny fragment of the work that they have done to support me and my community over the last several weeks. I agree with what the delegate said, that to residents, the changes that were proposed to the secondary plans are significant, especially when trying to grapple with the changes to the zoning bylaw. And I can only imagine what staff are dealing with the perpetual introduction of new bills and changes from the province. And certainly I understood when staff weren't able to come out to my community to speak to them. I was really fortunate to be able to host 2 sessions on my own. Even though I often don't know what I'm talking about, I was able to take in all the questions. I did one virtually, one in person, and staff were really good about getting back to me, providing answers to the questions I was unable to answer. They met with my community associations. There was general agreement within my community that the changes proposed initially would not actually help meet our intensification goals. And so staff were really good at working with me, understanding the community. Scott Moffat even came out to my community to tour around to see what I actually meant, took time in the evenings to do that. I quickly walked through some of the changes, but overall, you know, in discussing with my community, I learned a lot. You know, people do want to see intensification in the right places. I joked about the fruit stand, but we just got our first pub, and it is hopping. You know, it's only been a few years since we had a farmers market there. People do want to see intensification in the right space. I know from the New Ways to Bus, I get a lot of criticisms in the areas where I've got R1 and what has happened to the bus there. That includes where I live, where I now have one less choice. But in the areas where I have higher intensification, I've actually been getting compliments on New Ways to Bus. So kind of speaks to the fact that intensification, Councillor Troster said, can bring good things. The way that things were outlined initially didn't make a lot of sense. I see these as very positive changes for my community. And I just really wanted to just take this chance just to say thank you very much to Royce and to Lorraine and to Ben and to Ryan, and also to you know, Robert, Carol, Connie, and everyone else, Vivi, that really helped support my community over the last few weeks. I do feel that you know, I heard the comments that didn't have time to come out to the communities, and I really feel that staff really pulled through and really helped us come to a better space. So I just wanted to really thank staff. Thank you. I forgot to thank Scott, but I mentioned him earlier.
I'm sorry, I missed Councillor Luloff.
Thanks, Chair. I realize that the motion that has to do with the secondary plan in Orleans is of a technical nature today, so glad to be fixing that. I suppose my question is about the adding of land to meet our targets here. So we know the PPS 2024 directs us to use the most recent provincial population numbers when we're dealing with the applications to add land to the urban boundary. And my understanding is that Bill 17 also underscores the importance of using Ministry of Finance projections. So given that we've lost appeals on our application process, are we still committed to using the 2019 population projections when the PPS 2024 directs us to use the most recent numbers? And won't we just end up at the OLT again? Thanks.
So Chair, the PPS has a policy where Ministry of Finance population projections should be used to determine the household and employment projections. Normally, Ministry of Finance publishes those projections at the end of June. We're very near there today. Second item on today's agenda, we'll be talking about how our plan is to use that publication of those projections. Hopefully in a couple of weeks they come out and we can move forward with those for our growth update.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I don't see any of the other municipalities in Ontario doing this work that we're doing right now. Is there a reason why we're rushing to do it? That maybe we're aware of something that the other municipalities aren't?
So Chair, Joint Committee may recall back in October when staff brought forward that process to evaluate urban expansion applications. In addition to that process, we identified that we would review our growth projections, update our population growth projections using the Ministry of Finance population projections. So that is the path that staff is putting forward, is to implement sort of that direction for staff to process those settlement area expansions. And then the second part of that is to update our growth updates. So that's just part of the package that staff put together in front of committee and council in the fall. And we're moving forward with that project timeline.
Okay, understood. I think I probably would have appreciated a little bit more of a chat prior to committee today with staff. I think I would encourage you as we go through this process to reach out proactively, especially to members that are not usually sitting on the planning committee. As a member of ARAC, yes, we do deal with quite a few planning files, but this is far more technical than I'm used to dealing with on ARAC. So I probably could have used a good solid half hour with you to ask some questions, but here we are. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Luff. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. So I remember what I was going to say, but I also had another question. So what I was going to say about the secondary plans was also with respect to the College Ward community, when you increase density, you increase the amount of property tax generated on a particular site versus an R1 zone. And for my neighborhoods who are feeling, house rich and cash poor, ways to make sure that property taxes stay low is to increase density around a particular area. So although it's not maybe, the most ideal way, the alternative can sometimes be worse. And so we'll be working through that together. That's what I wanted to say. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Iris, because Iris, I was waiting for us to talk about Iris. It's the other LRT station in College Ward. It's the baby, while the Algonquin station is the mama bear. And I'd like to understand, I know there's a section about increasing the number of jobs and people projected as part of this exercise, but what does that mean translating on the ground? Will we see any impacts to existing zoning given that it is a neighborhood zone, or is it something that you think can be accommodated through the current zoning process?
So Chair, just a bit of context, we have 52 major transit station areas we're planning for through this amendment. 15 of them, so those transit station areas have density assigned from the PPS that translates into people and jobs given that area. 15 of those major transit station areas will not be able to achieve those densities, just given the context of what's around those transit station areas. So Iris is a great example. Iris is one of those stations. Our approach to accommodating that growth is to use strategic growth areas, so main streets, minor corridors, and hubs. Some of these areas do not have those type of strategic growth areas, or not enough, and then we'll have to rely on the neighborhood. to achieve that growth. So one approach could be to increase development potential significantly in the neighborhoods to achieve that growth. There is a policy in the PPS that allows for municipalities to request lower density targets for an MTSA if that development potential could not be achieved. So document 4 before committee today is the details of each of those 52 major transit station areas. For stations like Iris, we've identified a potential alternate target and why that can't be achieved just based on most of that catchment area being neighborhood. So staff is not recommending any major changes to that major transit station area. No major changes, no changes in the official plan. So therefore, in the new zoning bylaw, it would continue implementing the official plan as it would be today.
And do you anticipate, given that Moody being a significant LRT station, I know we had provisions or context specific protections around Moody, and we don't own much of the land around there. So I know it's in a similar position. So we're going to take the same approach when filing with province to discuss Moody's limitations as well.
That is correct. Most of the Moody catchment area is within the NCC Greenbelt, very limited development opportunities. So we will be requesting a lower density target at Moody as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Fascinating. Okay. Councillor Curry.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, ask a question and make a couple of comments. I guess a comment I would make is I don't often see this where there's such a flurry of motions at the last minute, people coming in. And I know they've been working for weeks, as they've been saying, but for us, like to digest as a joint committee, that there's a lot in each of those motions. And absolutely, as Councillor Trosser says, you trust the councillor from the area, they know their area, they know what they're doing. When I hear GOBA's representative Jason say that he thinks we should defer until we can actually fully understand this. I wonder about that as a thought in case there's something we don't realize we're doing. So I would like to ask staff when they if they contemplated that, us deferring to make sure we actually all understand what's going on here. What would be the risk in doing that?
So Chair, if we look at the official plan amendment before you today, and the new zoning bylaw process, there are really two phases to achieve the same thing, which is what is the development permissions within certain areas. If we defer on the official plan amendment side, and in short, that takes away from the consultation and review side on the zoning bylaw component. Some of the things we've talked about today, the discussion really is more into the zoning bylaw and how it would implement the official plan direction. So one example is we heard comments today in the Rockcliffe secondary plan and the Heritage Conservation District. A lot of the HCD in that area is actually implemented in the zoning bylaw through lot coverage and setbacks. And so what we're proposing is just maybe increase of height, but the zoning bylaw would continue looking at implementing the HCD components within the bylaw. So again, some of these discussions on how we implement going forward really is in the zoning bylaw. So the risk there, to answer the council's question, is we defer on this, we take away time on the zoning bylaw, or if we go even further, we would not be implementing in this new zoning bylaw, we would be implementing much later into 2027.
Okay, and so then I guess I would ask again, what is the rush if it is true that other municipalities are not doing this yet?
So again, Chair, and we're in committee and council's hands. If committee and council wishes to implement what staff's proposing in the new zoning bylaw, we've provided a path forward to do that. If committee and council wish to take more time, knowing that there's a chance that it may not be implemented in this bylaw and would be implemented after the fact, then committee and council can also defer and have us go on to that alternate timeline.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there because I guess a couple things, just the flurry of motions for sure. I'm hoping that everybody really understands the impacts and outcomes of these decisions. And then the other is the community associations coming out to say that they really feel they need more time on this. This is a hugely complicated file with lots of acronyms that I don't know that everyone follows every time somebody, says a lot of sentences with them in it. So I don't know. I guess I don't like to hear from GOBA that there's a chance we're working against some of our end goals. I didn't like that. But anyway, I'm leaving that with you. I think Councillor Tierney may have a further comment on that. But I want to give this some thought between now and council. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. Councillor Tierney?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Mr. Chair, just to be brief, a lot of these I have spoken with many of my colleagues. They've spoken to me on many of the motions. There is one or two, and I won't name people because I think it's just we're all digesting very quickly. I don't think it was anything on purpose. I guess the question is there an opportunity between now and council to be able to work with people to ensure we have a full understanding of those? Because I'm all about hurrying things up as well. We always keep delaying things, and I think it behooves us if we don't try to move quickly. But at the same time, if there is a great error, as someone that's been on previous works like this, I'd like to work with people, identify it, and go through them. Specifically, if we, between now and council, pretty quickly, if we could get a list of all the staff supported, the non-staff supported motions, and brief why. It doesn't have to be 10 pages. I think we're all good here in the working language of English to circulate to council colleagues, and then we can go through those piece by piece. That might be a good solution, and it would allow me to vote to proceed today, reserving my right to change things before council. Is that a possibility?
Is that a question to me, I think, Councillor Tierney?
No, it's actually to staff. Forgive me, Chair.
Chair, with respect to providing a table or a listing of motions and staff comment and whether or not we are supportive, that is certainly something that can be done. I would also offer that if there are, through the discussion today, if there are comments or questions that individual councillors have leading up to council, to please feel free to connect with, myself, Royce, or the team to work through those issues. We are happy to continue the dialogue until council.
Great. Thank you for all the additional work, and look forward to that list. I will support today, reserving the right to remove my support if need be. And I see Councillor Troster's hand up, and she highlighted a couple of points with Kent Street. So I could assume she'll probably have some questions about is there possibilities of future motions before council as well. But I'll cede the floor to Councillor Troster.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'll deal with Kent Street at some point. I mean, I just think the reality is we're going to keep getting height there. But, I just want to speak to the value of us actually passing this now, because a consistent problem is that when things come to committee, our communities get really upset because the secondary plans don't match with the zoning direction we're heading in. And the reality is that we have growth projections that are being imposed by the province. We don't have a choice either way. And so the best thing we can do is try to harmonize this now so that expectations are really clear. And I understand the communities are frustrated because some of them have spent years negotiating these secondary plans, but the political impetus has changed. Our density targets have changed. The housing crisis has gotten worse. And so I think we all have to take some water with our wine here. Our communities are changing. And I think bringing these secondary plans up to speed with the direction we're heading in with the zoning, I think it's just going to save us a lot of grief in the long term. And unfortunately, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. Like, some communities are not happy about this. I get it. There's moments where my community isn't happy either. But I think allowing this mismatch to continue for longer between secondary plans and the zoning is just going to lead to more time in committee, more frustration. I would rather regularize this sooner rather than later, because I actually don't think the outcome is going to be any different. That's my opinion. Thanks. And thanks to staff for all your work on this. And we'll talk about Kent Street in the future. I don't think there's a rush right now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. I don't see any other questions from members. I just have, I think, one of my own, or sorry, I have two of my own. One of which is Ms. Mellons raised the issue of an obligation that she feels council has to update the OP with the most recent growth numbers in order to be in conformity with the provincial policy statement. I'm going to guess you disagree, but we did receive a legal letter about that yesterday. So, Mr. Mark, do you agree with Ms. Mellons?
Mr. Chair,
it is my opinion that it is not necessary for a municipality in one instrument, in one OPA, to bring an official plan into compliance with all policies in the provincial planning statement. I do agree with her that there's no deadline established in section 26, but it's my opinion that bringing an OP into consistency with the PPS can be done by one or more official plan amendments, and where one change is, as I would suggest this one is largely a policy change, whereas another, the growth projections, requires in-depth study and analysis and information gathering. It makes good sense to move forward with the one that more commends itself to being done first, and then doing the study necessary to comply with the growth policies in the provincial planning statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. My second question is with respect to the radius from the MTSAs. We've used an 800. Some delegates have suggested a 500. A 500-meter radius is what, 40% difference from an 800-meter radius, 62%, something like that. If we were to lose 40% of the radius around MTSAs, which are our targets for the densest possible development that we're going to build, what would be the end effect on how much more density we'd have to put in the neighborhoods?
Chair, reducing the, I apologize for my camera. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, it's really weird. Sweet.
Reducing the MTSA catchment areas reduces the hectares, which reduces the target people and jobs. That does not change the approach staff has brought forward to committee and council, which is to use strategic growth areas to accommodate the growth. So that's to say that we can still continue to look at hubs, main streets, minor corridors to accommodate whatever that growth would be from what is existing, and the neighborhoods would continue playing their role in gentle intensification. So there'd just be less growth, a lower target around each major transit station area.
And what would be wrong with that?
So, Chair, the PPS speaks to a range of 500 to 800 meters. Staff has chosen a metric that is between those ranges, and it's based on the notion of walking distance, which is, in our official plan, when we developed it, we had the notion of 15-minute neighborhoods. We wanted to walk to service amenities that you get in your daily and weekly needs. And that type of walking distance, that type of metric lends itself to that strategic direction that council has provided in an official plan.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. I do want to thank each of the movers of the various motions for explaining one by one what their motions effectively do. And I thank staff for their comments on each one of those. I know that was very helpful to me. So I'm going to run through the amendments one by one. There is the Curry amendment on behalf of Councillor Gower with respect to reviewing the TMP, IMP, and AMPs after conducting a population forecast update. Is that carried? There is the Curry motion on behalf of Councillor Carr with respect to the Riverview Park secondary plan. Is that carried? There was a motion from Councillor Curry also on behalf of Councillor Carr with respect to the Riverview and Pleasant Park MTSAs. Is that carried? There's the motion from Councillor King with respect to the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan. Is that carried? There is the motion that was made by Councillor Kavanagh on behalf of Councillor Menard with respect to revisions to the old Ottawa East secondary plan amendments. Is that carried? Thank you. There is the motion from Councillor Brockington with respect to the Carlton Heights secondary plan in 1335 Prince of Wales Drive. Is that carried? There was a motion from Councillor Dudas with respect to OPA changes to be reflected in the new zoning bylaw. Is that carried? There's a technical motion from Councillor Brown with respect to the Orleans Corridor secondary plan. Is that carried? Are the reports, sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I assume it's like report as amended. Is that carried? Recommendations as amended? Amazing. Thank you. So councillors, I am getting notes from other councillors with respect to departure. We have one more item to go. Just by show of hands, who can stick around for the next Hour and 15 minutes. 1, 2. Are you able to? Hour and 15? We have 4 delegations. Jason gets his hand up. Thank you, Jason. Another hour and 15 minutes? You know what? Let's keep going until we lose quorum. So the next item is the official plan update, growth projections. There is a staff presentation. There are 3 requests to speak, and we've also received a number of correspondence as well. So staff presentation, I think that's Natalie Polsin.
So Chair, Lorraine Stevens will be filling in for Natalie on this presentation.
Thank you very much. We're bumping against kid pickup and so potential quorum issues. So anything you can do to provide some brevity in the presentation would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. So this report outlines, next slide, please. This report outlines the scope of work for an official plan update and is broken down into 2 sections, growth related and non-growth related. For growth related, on October 16 of last year, Council approved the framework for urban and village area boundary expansion official plan applications to align with the new PPS. The framework also proposed the city initiate an update to the OP growth projections in 2025 using the Ministry of Finance population projection as the basis. The report today outlines the scope of work required for the growth projections update. For non-growth related, staff recommend moving forward with limited non-growth related updates at this time to ensure consistency with major legislative changes enacted since the OP's approval, and will also be undertaking a review of village plans. This report outlines the scope of work for those non-related items. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to talk about is an update to the population, household, and employment projections in the official plan. The Ministry of Finance population projections will be used as the basis and be adjusted if required. The growth projections begin with the population growth as they are the foundation for the future housing and employment needs. Housing needs are analyzed by the types of housings or dwellings that the future population will occupy. Employment needs are analyzed by the number of jobs stemming from the future population and commuting flows between Ottawa and outlying communities. Second is a growth management strategy. The updated growth projections will be used to analyze whether the City of Ottawa has sufficient land within the urban area and villages to house its population growth, or if additional settlement area lands are required. Similarly, staff will review existing industrial and logistics lands to determine if additional lands are required based on the employment projections. And third, if it's determined that additional residential and or additional industrial land is required, a comprehensive land selection process can begin. The selection process would be similar to the new OP process, and city staff will seek direction from council on the scoring criteria used. Next slide. For the portion of the official plan update not related to growth projections, we have 4 themes. Policies to implement the community benefit charges framework. Currently, we have policies for interim measures for collecting community benefits applicable to certain development projects just until we have a community benefit charge bylaw in place. We want to update those policies if the community benefit charge bylaw is in place over the course of our consultations. We'll also want to update any other official plan policies to align with the framework. And this review will also include reviewing secondary plans to align with the framework. As for the legislative changes, with the PPS consistency official plan amendment, we incorporated changes from various provincial legislation, including Bill 97 and Bill 185. And now that Bill 117 has been passed, which is Protect Ontario by Building Faster and Smarter Act, we'll be looking at the impacts of that legislation or any other legislation that comes forward during the course of our consultations. Corrections to mapping and policy errors. Staff strive to provide accuracy and clarity on an ongoing basis. A citywide official plan amendment is an opportunity to move forward with anything discovered along the way. And the village plans, which will be the biggest part of the non-growth projection portion of the official plan amendment. Skip over that. Next slide, please. One commitment made at the Rural Summit by the Mayor in November of 2024 was to develop a balanced rural growth strategy, which was to include collaboration with rural councillors and exploring opportunities for balanced development across the villages. In addition to any feedback provided from collaborating with the rural councillors, the review of the village plans will include bringing policies in line with 15-minute neighborhoods, paring down policies where development has already occurred, because after build out, the relevant direction would be considered infill. Looking at dated community design plans, which are falling out of line with their corresponding secondary plans as over time, and to also look at determining what is visionary and versus policy to provide a clear direction for how development should proceed. And the next slide, please. Staff will begin working on the OP growth update when the population projections are available from the Ministry of Finance. They are expected to be available this month or next month. During the remainder of this year, staff will begin consultation on both the growth updates and non-growth related updates. Staff will then return in Q1 2026 with a report to Joint PHC at NARAC and Council on the updated growth projections and growth management strategy, and if required, seek direction on scoring criteria for settlement area expansion. Staff will also first draft of village plan amendments for public circulation. In Q2, Q3 2026, if required, staff will begin scoring candidate settlement area parcels and undertake public consultation on village plans. Next slide. Continued on timelines, Q4 2026, staff will consult with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on the official plan updates. Additionally, if required, public consultation on candidate settlement area parcels will occur, and staff will circulate updated draft of the village plans to the public. And in Q1 2027, staff will hold a public open house on the proposed amendments. And finally, in Q1 2027, staff will return to Joint PHC and ARAC for consideration of the draft official plan amendments for both the updated growth and non-growth related matters. Next slide. So to recap, our next steps are staff will review the 2025 publication of the Ministry of Finance population projections. With the population projections, household employment projections will then be completed. Once the projections are drafted, staff will develop a growth management strategy. Throughout this process, staff will be undertaking targeted stakeholder consultation and engagement. And for the non-growth related updates, staff will consult with rural councillors, development industry, and other stakeholders regarding current challenges with the rural secondary plans to guide in the development of draft amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll come back to you for questions after the public delegations, the first of which is John Cooper. He's online? Okay.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
We can. Hi, John.
Hi, sorry about that.
You'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee when you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is John Cooper. I'm a resident of 1245 Old Second Line Road. I'd primarily like to ask a question on behalf of the South March West Property Owners Group, and this might be appropriate to forward to city staff. The South March West Property Owners Group is a new group consisting of the property owners of 9 land parcels immediately west of Old Second Line Road between Old Carp Road and March Road. I have a good understanding of the update process as recently described in the report. I do have one specific question on one aspect. There was a recently completed report called City of Ottawa Land Needs Assessment, written by Parcel Economics Incorporated, dated 3 March 25, and submitted in support of the South March Urban Expansion Area private application D0101240025. During the city's official plan update and growth projections, will city staff be reviewing this report? And will city staff be able to explain and communicate any significant differences found between the conclusions of the parcel economics assessment and the conclusions of the city's own official plan growth projections and land needs assessment at some appropriate time during the official plan update growth projection project? I hope I've communicated my question clearly. Thank you.
John, thank you very much for the presentation. What I would ask, I don't know if staff were able to capture that question. Yeah, okay, so somebody from the committee will ask staff that question when it comes time to ask questions of staff. Thank you very much. And I don't see any, oh, I've lost my Zoom window. I don't see any further questions for you, so thank you very much for the presentation today. The next speaker is Curtis Andrew.
All right, good day, Chair and committee members. I'm here in a personal capacity from the village of Metcalfe, and my presentation is directed towards the non-growth updates for the consolidated villages, which would include Metcalfe, as well as the scoring criteria that may be used for the expansion exercise if it's ultimately implemented. And what I would like to talk about is, I have a specific example, but it may also have broader implications for other situations that are similar to mine. I have an image that I submitted that I think is going to get put up now. So this is the village of Metcalfe, and what I've outlined here is some land to the west of the village that is bound by the developed areas of the village and the Middle Castor River. And I own 2 of the properties in there, and I farm them as well. And currently we access the lands that are outlined in part of the lands that are outlined in pink by coming through the subdivision there, because there's no other way to get across the river with modern farm equipment. And so what I am essentially what I am submitting here is that a situation like this on a broader scale, where you maybe see lands that are sandwiched between a natural barrier like a river and the settlement area, when we talk about scoring criteria, is to consider that sort of situation when scoring it. If you're looking at expanding the urban boundary, because when the area that I have labeled there that is currently zoned DR1 development reserve, I believe it is, we're going to be sealed off for those lands when that eventually becomes developed. And even now, when we come in through Johannes Street, we have to get permission from that landowner to get over to our lands at the back on the east side of the river. And so we're kind of at their mercy at the moment in order to be able to farm that back there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you're looking at, efficient use of land for potential future development, consider lands such as this, because once it gets sealed off, I'm not going to be able to farm it any longer because I can't get the equipment over there. And rather than use other agricultural lands, I mean, these are zoned rural, but rather than use other lands that are being used for agricultural purposes for the expansion of the urban boundaries, then maybe perhaps look at lands like this that are going to be otherwise cut off for those purposes, just for efficiency purposes. And also look at this again, also in the context of reviewing the non-growth considerations for the for the village of Metcalfe specifically. That's really all the comments that I have. I'm certainly open for any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Obviously, we're probably a couple of steps away from being able to discuss these sort of specific parcel considerations or even the kinds of considerations that you're raising. But if members did have a question, I don't see any. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I certainly didn't want to put this forward as considering a specific parcel per se. It's just consider the circumstances, especially when when development of the scoring criteria for expansion takes place.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And so our final speaker this afternoon is Mr. Burgraff.
Thanks very much, Chair. My basic comment is please go faster. But in seriousness, like we do have in the OP implementation somewhere in 11 somewhere. There is a commitment to look at the growth projections and land needs for both residential and employment within 5 years to be reviewed. And we look at to be reviewed as not only the information, but council decision as well. So that would put you at November 2026. Obviously, that is a bit in conflict with the scheduled municipal election. So that's why you see the date of August 2026 in our submission. And it would obviously be very ideal, I think, to wrap all those things up before we get into that window on the election. But let me just wrap up. Actually, first, I was remiss. I didn't thank staff previously in my comments. We might not always agree on the direction or how to get there or something like that, but they always are usually very good. I think I asked Lorraine 4 different questions yesterday, and she got back to me very promptly. So I do want to acknowledge that. I moved when I came to Ottawa. I moved into the Hogsback buildings, which Councillor Brockington reminded me of when I was a student. Those were built sometime in the 70s, early 80s. I then had the opportunity to move into a townhouse in Chapman Mills in Barrhaven that was built sometime in the early 2000s, and now I'm living in a home, a single detached home in South Fallingbrook in Orleans that was built in the mid-90s. The reason I had the opportunity to move to those houses was not because someone built them right at that moment or in that year. It was because council's previous editions of this council, decided that yes, we need to expand into those areas 10, 20 years before those houses were built. And, just to sum up the entire day, I just want to reiterate that all this exercise and these decisions are really talking about housing options we're going to have 10, 20 years down the road, not tomorrow, not a year from now. And I just want to reiterate that is, the real exercise here. Again, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to move around Ottawa because of the decisions that council made umpteen decades before I even moved here. So I just want to keep that in reflection as well. I'll pass that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And that's actually a wonderful high-level view of what we're doing here. So that's well taken. I don't see any questions for you, Jason. I appreciate your time and making the presentation. Thank you. So we have questions of staff, if anyone would like to make any. And I am going to ask staff to take direction on behalf of Councillor Menard. So I don't see any hands up to ask questions of staff. I'll ask a question of staff. Would you undertake it as direction to review the feasibility of increasing the residential intensification target from the current 51-49 split by the end of the planning term and report back on that in Q1 2026?
We would take that as direction, Chair.
I'm assuming that is work that you would be doing even if you were not undertaking that as a commitment today.
That would be a normal part of our work program.
You'll be, I don't know when you do come back to us. I was here for the GMS ahead of the last official plan. And that Goldilocks approach of we could really sprawl, we could really stuff infill, or we could have a very balanced approach was actually quite helpful. So I hope we'll see the same thing with respect to council options in the next round. I don't see any hands. Are the report recommendations carried? We're done. Okay. Are my official duties are not yet done. We have no in-camera items. Are there any notices of motion? None had come forward to me. No inquiries as far as I know. We have no other business. We are adjourned until our next meeting TBD. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone on staff. That's a long day. I appreciate your work on this. Marcia, thank you. That's a long day for you. Thank you.